Hi guys, and welcome to Boring History Story Relaxing. Tonight, we drop you straight into the fading light of a frontier evening, the kind where the sky turns pale and metallic and the cold arrives early like it forgot something important and rushed back to claim it. You are standing on open prairie boots, already stiff fingers aching around a shovel handle that feels colder than the air itself. Somewhere behind you, the wind drags across the grass with a low hiss. You probably will not survive this if you forget how fast winter can turn careless mistakes into permanent ones. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you are settling in, tell me where you are listening from and what time it is there right now. Now dim the lights and let your eyes rest as we move quietly into the story. You dig because there is no other choice. Timber is scarce out here, and hauling lumber across miles of frozen ground costs more money and energy than you have. This is one of those widely accepted truths of frontier life. In the 1800s, dugout shelters were not built because people liked them, but because earth was cheap, stubborn everywhere. Your shovel bites into soil that is already half frozen, making a dull, resistant sound that travels up your arms. Each scoop smells raw and mineral like damp stone. The daylight fades faster than you expect, and you work by instinct as much as sight, knowing that once night fully settles, the cold will sharpen. As you dig deeper, the wind seems to pass over you rather than through you. It is subtle, but you notice it. Even now, with only a shallow pit, the earth already feels calmer, quieter. Many settlers wrote that the ground itself became a kind of reluctant ally, absorbing sound and cutting the worst of the wind. Some historians still argue whether dugouts were primarily a temporary solution or a long-term adaptation to treeless plains. But standing here, you can feel the practical logic in your bones. The prairie does not care about comfort. It cares about survival. You scrape the walls smooth with the flat of your shovel, packing the dirt tight with your boots. Your breath fogs heavily in front of your face, hanging there before drifting upward and disappearing. A quirky detail that often surprises people is that some frontier families marked the height of their dugout walls by stretching a rope between stakes, ensuring just enough headroom to sit upright, but not an inch more. Extra space meant extra air to heat, and tonight heat is everything. By the time you start shaping the roof supports, the sky has gone dark blue, almost black. You work by feel fingers numb, placing rough logs or scavenged boards across the top. Over these you pile sod cut from the prairie itself. The sod smells faintly sweet and rotten, at the same time grassy on one side and earthy on the other. You press it down firmly, knowing that snow will soon pile on top, adding weight and insulation in equal measure. There is a persistent debate among scholars about whether settlers truly trusted sod roofs or merely tolerated them. But as you pat the earth into place, trust is not the word. Resignation fits better. When you finally crawl inside, it is barely tall enough to kneel. The ceiling looms close, dark and uneven. The walls are damp to the touch, cool and gritty. You pause, listening. Above you, the wind resumes its restless movement, but it sounds distant now, muffled like it is happening in another world. This is one of the small mercies of sleeping underground that many pioneers later described. Noise softens. The prairie becomes a whisper instead of a roar. You sit down on the packed dirt floor, legs stiff, and flex your fingers inside wool gloves that never fully dry. There is no bed yet, just a space where one will be. Still, your body exhales a long breath, relieved to be out of the open air. The temperature inside the dugout is not warm, not even close, but it is steadier. The kind of cold that settles instead of attacks. A mainstream historical observation from diaries of the period is that many settlers could feel a difference of several degrees between above-ground air and the interior of a dugout, even without a fire. Tonight, you believe it. Your nose still stings, but the pain eases slightly. You rub your hands together and imagine the small iron stove you will install. Soon the faint glow will offer the thin line of smoke curling up through a pipe that punches straight into the sky. For now, though, there is only you, the earth, and the sound of your own breathing. Each inhale feels loud in the small space. Each exhale fogs and fades. You run your hand along the wall and feel tiny grains crumble loose, falling silently to the floor. It reminds you that this shelter is alive in its own slow way, always shifting, always settling. You think briefly about people back east sleeping tonight in framed houses with plaster walls and glass windows. The thought passes quickly. Comparison does not help here. Out on the frontier, sleep is not about comfort or dreams. It is about making it to morning. You lay out the first blanket, rough wool scratching your palms. It smells of smoke, sweat, and old journeys. You smooth it as best you can, knowing it will never be smooth enough. Somewhere outside, the wind rises again and a faint vibration travels through the sod roof. You wait, heart slowing, listening for signs of collapse that do not come. There is a saying among frontier families that the first night in a dugout is the longest night of the winter. Some historians question whether this was literal or emotional, but sitting here now you understand the feeling behind it. Everything is unfamiliar. The earth presses close, the dark feels thicker. And yet there is a strange sense of being held, cradled by the land itself. You draw your coat tighter, pull your hat down over your ears and lie back on the hard floor. It is unforgiving cold seeping through layers of cloth. But above you the sod roof does its quiet work. The wind slides past. The prairie keeps moving. And for the first time since dusk you are still. Your eyes close not because you are comfortable, but because there is nothing left to do. Tomorrow you will improve this place, is said. Tonight you let the earth take the edge off the cold and offer you its version of shelter. Your breathing slows. The darkness steadies. Sleep approaches cautiously like an animal unsure if it is safe. You wake without fully waking, the kind of half-awareness where your body notices discomfort before your mind catches up. The cold has crept closer during the night, not sharper, just heavier. It presses against your back and shoulders, seeping through wool and skin with patient determination. The earth walls around you feel colder now, having given up what little warmth they borrowed from yesterday's sun. You sit up slowly, careful not to knock your head on the low ceiling. The dugout smells stronger this morning. Damp soil, old smoke from a fire you have not yet built, the faint animal scent of wool and leather. These smells cling to everything. Over time, settlers wrote that they'd stopped noticing them entirely, but on this second stretch underground, they still feel you intimate, almost intrusive. You run your hand along the wall again. In the weak light filtering through the doorway, you can see where the dirt has darkened overnight. Moisture has crept in, pulled from your breath, and the warmer air trapped inside. This is one of those simple, unglamorous facts of dugout living that shows up again and again in frontier letters. Earth shelters hold heat better than open air, but they also hold dampness like a secret. The warmth you borrow comes with strings attached. As you shift your weight, fine grains of dirt fall silently from the ceiling, landing on your blanket and hair. You brush them away without much reaction. A quirky detail recorded by some settlers is that they learned to tell the weather by listening to the walls. When the soil stayed dry and firm, fair weather followed. When it softened and shed grit snow, or rain was on the way. You file that thought away already, becoming more observant than you were yesterday. Outside the prairie, wind has softened to a low murmur. It no longer screams. It breathes. That change alone feels like a victory. You lean closer to the doorway and peek out. The sky is pale, almost colourless, and the ground beyond is stiff with frost. The dugout opening looks small from inside a narrow rectangle of light and cold. You hesitate before stepping out, savouring the fragile bubble of stillness you have found underground. There has always been debate among historians about whether dugouts were genuinely warmer than cabins in deep winter, or if settlers simply endured them better because they had no alternative. Sitting here, you suspect the truth lies somewhere in between. The earth does not make you warm, but it shields you from the worst excesses of the wind. It turns a brutal cold into a manageable one. You spend the morning improving the walls, packing them tighter, smoothing loose sections with gloved hands and the flat of your shovel. Each thump sends a dull echo through the space. The sound feels absorbed rather than reflected, as if the earth is listening instead of responding. This quiet is one of the hidden benefits of dugout life. Storms rage above, but down here noise loses its sharp edges. As midday passes, you notice something else. The temperature inside barely changes even as the sun rises and falls. This steady coolness is not comfortable, but is predictable. Many pioneer accounts mention that dugouts felt strangely consistent compared to cabins, which could swing wildly between freezing and stifling depending on the fire. You're beginning to understand why that mattered. Predictable cold is easier to plan for than surprise warmth that vanishes the moment a fire dies. You lay down more bedding, layering blankets and hides until the floor looks almost inviting. Almost. You press down with your hand and feel the chill rise immediately to meet you. No matter how much you add, the ground always remembers winter. Some settlers stuffed straw between layers to trap air and block the cold, while others swore by newspapers or spare clothing. Historians still argue whether any method made a significant difference, but the ritual itself seems important. Doing something feels better than surrendering completely. As evening returns, you light a small fire outside and heat stones, carrying them carefully into the dugout. This practice was common enough that it shows up in multiple first-hand accounts. The stones radiate warmth for a short while, just enough to take the bite out of the air. You place them near where you will sleep, enjoying the faint heat on your palms before it fades. The walls begin to sweat again as the interior warms. Tiny beads of moisture form and slide downward, tracing slow paths through the dirt. You watch one droplet gather weight before falling silently to the floor. This is the trade you make. Warmth for dampness. Shelter for mold. Frontier life is full of these quiet exchanges. You eat a simple meal, bread hard from the cold fat stiff and waxy. Chewing feels like work. You swallow slowly, aware of how every calorie matters now. A widely accepted fact among historians is that winter survival on the frontier depended as much on food management as shelter. Sleeping warm means little if hunger wakes you before dawn. Night settles in again earlier than it should. Darkness presses against the doorway, and you block it with a heavy cloth to keep the cold air from pouring in. The dugout grows dim and close. Your breath fogs, then clears, then fogs again. You settle onto your bedding, adjusting layers until nothing feels quite right, but nothing feels unbearable either. Above you, the wind returns stronger now. You hear it move across the sod roof, not tearing, not lifting, just testing. You lie still, listening for creaks or sudden shifts that would signal trouble. There is a persistent scholarly discussion about how often dugout roofs actually collapsed in winter. Some records suggest it was rare, others imply it happened often enough to haunt settlers' dreams. As you stare into the darkness, you understand why fear alone could make it feel frequent. Condensation begins to drip again, slow and steady. One drop lands on your sleeve, cold and startling. You reposition slightly, pulling your coat tighter. This is not sleep the way you knew it before. This is vigilance softened by exhaustion. And yet something surprising happens. As the night deepens, your body adapts. The cold stops shouting and starts whispering. Your muscles loosen. Your breathing slows. The dugout holds its temperature, neither improving nor worsening. The earth does not comfort you, but it steadies you. You think briefly about tomorrow, about small improvements. You can make cracks, you can seal routines, you can build. Then the thought drifts away. Sleep arrives in fragments, thin but persistent. Between each waking moment, you sink back down, held in place by packed dirt and low expectations. The dugout is teaching you its rules. Borrow warmth. Accept dampness. Move slowly. Listen carefully. And for now, that's enough to carry you through another winter night. You wake again before dawn, not because of noise, but because the air feels different. Heavier somehow. The dugout has settled during the night, the earth adjusting to cold and gravity in its own slow language. When you sit up, your shoulder brushes the ceiling and loose crumbs of soil tumble down your sleeve. You pause listening, heart briefly alert, waiting for something worse that does not arrive. The roof holds, for now. You light a small lamp and let its weak glow crawl across the ceiling. What you see is close, uneven, and unsettling. Logs laid side by side, packed with dirt, topped with sod that still carries the memory of grass. This roof is not a barrier so much as an agreement. It agrees to stay in place as long as weather, snow, and time allow it. A mainstream historical fact often mentioned in homestead records is that sod roofs were prized for insulation, especially in winter. Thick layers of earth trapped warmth better than bare wood ever could. That truth does not erase the anxiety that comes with knowing several hundred pounds of soil rest just inches above your face. Warmth and weight arrive together. You reach up and press gently with your palm. The roof feels firm, cold, and slightly damp. Moisture has crept upward overnight, drawn by the warmer air inside. It has nowhere to go but back down. This is the part few guidebooks prepared settlers for. Dugout ceilings sweat like living things. Over time, families learn to live with constant drips arranging sleeping spots to avoid the worst of it. A quirky tidbit buried in old letters describes pioneers tacking fabric or oilcloth beneath the ceiling to catch falling moisture. Some even hung strips of cloth that funneled water toward buckets. You consider the idea briefly, imagining the soft patter of drops hitting metal through the night. Practical, yes. Comforting, not really. Outside, the wind rises again. You hear it rush across the prairie, then soften as it meets the sod above you. Snow begins to fall not loudly but persistently. You cannot see it, but you feel the difference as the roof grows quieter. Snow piles on top, adding weight and insulation in equal measure. This is one of the strange paradoxes of frontier winter. The worst storms often made dugouts warmer. Snow-filled gaps sealed drafts and turned the roof into a thick blanket. Historians still argue whether settlers welcomed heavy snowfall for this reason or feared it more than anything else. Sitting here, you understand both sides. Snow means warmth, but it also means pressure. Too much and the roof could sag or give way. You find yourself listening closely for changes in sound, for creaks or sudden shifts that might signal trouble. The day passes slowly. Light filters weakly through the doorway, reflecting off pale snow outside. You reinforce the roof from below, wedging extra supports where you can. Each log groans slightly as it takes on more weight. You work carefully, movements deliberate. Sudden force is not your friend here. By afternoon, the dugout feels noticeably warmer. Not warm in any modern sense, but gentler. The air no longer bites your nose. Your breath still fogs, but less dramatically. This is the snow doing its quiet work above you. A layer that would terrify you if it fell is now helping you survive. You lie back and stare at the ceiling again. Dirt grains cling to the roots woven through the sod. Bits of grass poke downward, frozen in a place. It is oddly beautiful in a rough, accidental way. The prairie itself has become part of your shelter. You are sleeping beneath the land, not just on it. Fear does not disappear, though. It changes shape. Instead of sharp panic, it becomes a constant awareness. You learn to feel the roof with your ears as much as your eyes. Every sound matters. A thud of settling snow, a faint trickle of melting ice, a distant crack that might be frost-splitting soil or might be something worse. There is an ongoing scholarly debate about how often roof collapses actually occurred in sod and dugout homes. Some researchers suggest the danger was exaggerated in later retellings, while others point to enough recorded accidents to prove the fear was justified. You suspect that even rare events felt common when the risk hovered above your head every night. As evening approaches, the storm outside intensifies. Snow pushes against the doorway, narrowing it further. You clear it carefully, mindful not to disturb the roof above. Each scoop of snow feels heavier than it should, wet and dense. You move it away from the entrance, creating a small trench so you can still breathe easily through the night. Back inside, the dugout feels almost snug. The walls hold steady. The roof presses downward with quiet determination. You add more fuel to your tiny stove, keeping the fire modest. Too much heat could melt snow unevenly, causing sudden shifts above. This is another unspoken rule of dugout living. Warmth must be managed, not chased. Night settles again deeper and quieter than before. Snow muffles the world completely. Even the wind sounds distant now, as if wrapped in cloth. You lie down, pulling your blankets tight, and let the darkness close in. The ceiling looms close but familiar. Condensation returns dripping slowly. One drop lands near your ear. You flinch, then relax. It is just water. Just gravity. Just the trade you have already accepted. Your thoughts drift to others who have slept like this. Families with children tucked against earth walls. Lone men riding out storms in holes they carved with their own hands. Letters sent east scribing roofs that breathed and floors that froze. This is not an unusual experience for the time. It is simply rarely imagined in detail. As sleep approaches, fear softens. Not because danger is gone, but because exhaustion dulls its edge. The roof holds. The snow insulates. The earth presses close but does not move. You breathe slowly, syncing your rhythm to the quiet weight above you. You learn something important tonight. Sleeping in a dugout is not about trusting the roof completely. It is about accepting uncertainty and resting anyway, letting the earth do what it will while you do what you must. Your eyes close, the dugout settles, snow continues to fall. And for another night the agreement holds. You wake fully this time, pulled out of sleep by a slow ache rather than sudden fear. Your hips press against the hard ground, your shoulder numb where it has rested too long without movement. For a moment you forget where you are. Then the ceiling hovers into focus close enough that you could touch it without lifting your arm, and this memory settles back into place. You are underground, it is winter, and this is another night finished. The dugout feels still, almost heavy with quiet. Snow has done its work well. The air inside no longer feels sharp, it feels muted, as though the cold has wrapped itself in wool. Your breath rises in pale clouds, but they drift lazily now instead of bursting outward. You sit up carefully, listening first, always listening. Nothing shifts above you, no cracking, no sudden sigh of dirt. The roof holds, and with that knowledge comes a small release of tension you did not realize you were carrying. This is something many period journals mention indirectly. Settlers often wrote about sleeping lightly at first, waking often, then slowly learning to trust the structure around them. Not because it became safer overnight, but because the body adapts when it has no alternative. Rest, even shallow rest, becomes essential. You swing your legs around and stretch your stiff fingers, rubbing warmth back into them. The smell of damp earth is stronger now, mixed with the faint metallic scent of yesterday's heated stones. These odours no longer feel alarming. They are becoming familiar, and familiarity brings a strange comfort of its own. Outside, the world is buried. You push aside the cloth covering the doorway and are met with a wall of pale light reflecting off snow. The entrance has narrowed again, drifted nearly shut. You clear it slowly, careful not to jar the roof. Snow slides down in soft, heavy clumps, thudding quietly at your feet. There is an often overlooked reality of dugout living that comes through clearly in letters from the 1800s. Much of winter life was spent managing entrances rather than interiors. Doors froze, openings vanished overnight. Each morning began with excavation before anything else could happen. You understand that now as you carve yourself back into the daylight. When you retreat inside again, the dugout feels darker, by contrast almost womb-like. You block the doorway once more, sealing in what warmth you can. The temperature inside remains stubbornly steady. It does not greet you with comfort, but it also does not punish you for leaving. You lie back down this time, intentionally adjusting your position with care. You place a folded blanket beneath your hip, another beneath your shoulder. It is not much, but it changes everything. Sleep, you are learning, is not a single act here. It is a series of negotiations. A lesser-known habit among dugout dwellers involved rotating sleeping positions through the night. People shifted not just for comfort, but to avoid drawing too much moisture into one spot of bedding. Dampness was a constant enemy, quietly stiffening blankets and leaching heat. You roll slightly onto your side and feel how the fabric beneath you is already cooler than the rest. Some researchers remain divided on whether dugouts were actually healthier than surface shelters during winter. The earth buffered cold, yes, but it also trapped moisture and limited airflow. Respiratory illness appears often in winter accounts, and many scholars point to underground living as a contributing factor. Lying here breathing air that smells faintly of soil and smoke, you can imagine how lungs might struggle over time. Your body, however, is focused on the present. It wants rest. You close your eyes again, and this time sleep comes faster. Not deep, not indulgent, but real enough. You drift, waking occasionally to the sound of dripping water. Each drop lands softly, irregularly, like a clock that refuses to keep time. You learn to tune it out the way you tune out the pressure of the ceiling or the cold in your feet. This is another unspoken skill of frontier nights, ignoring just enough to survive. At some point you wake to silence so complete it feels loud. The storm has passed. Snow has settled. Even the wind has paused as if catching its breath. The dugout feels heavier now, wrapped in layers of frozen quiet. You lie still, savouring that pause. Nights like this were often described by settlers as the easiest to endure despite the cold. Calm meant predictability. Predictability meant safety, or at least the illusion of it. A curious detail shows up in a handful of frontier diaries. Some people claim they slept better during blizzards than during clear windy nights. The explanation was simple. Snow sealed the earth. Wind found fewer ways inside. Tonight you are inclined to agree. You reach out and touch the wall beside you. It feels firm, almost solid, no longer shedding grit. Frozen earth holds itself together more tightly. This is one of the small seasonal mercies that winter offers before spring arrives and turns everything soft and unstable again. You think about the seasons ahead, about thawing ground and dripping ceilings that will become streams, but that is later. For now, winter has locked the dugout into place. Your breathing slows. Muscles unclench. The ache in your joints dulls into something manageable. This is the rhythm your body is settling into. Work, cold, brief warmth, broken sleep. Repeated night after night until it no longer feels temporary. There is a continuing discussion among historians about whether dugouts should be seen as symbols of hardship or resilience. Some frame them as desperate shelters born of poverty. Others see them as clever adaptations to an unforgiving environment. Lying here now, you realize they are both at once. The dugout is not heroic, but it is effective. It does not inspire, but it sustains. You shift once more, careful practice now, your blanket rustles softly. The ceiling does not answer. That silence feels earned. Sleep returns deeper than before. Your thoughts blur, losing their sharp edges. The earth presses close, but no longer feels threatening. It simply exists, doing what it has always done. Above you, snow holds steady. Below you, the ground holds firm. And for this stretch of the night, you are held too. You surface from sleep slowly, like something rising through thick water. The first thing you notice is your breath. It feels heavier, slower, each inhale tasting faintly of earth and ash. The dugout has cooled again during the night, not dramatically, but enough that your nose tingles and your fingers ache when you move them. You stay still for a moment listening. There is no wind clawing at the roof now, no hiss across the sod. It's deep padded quiet, the kind that only comes after fresh snowfall. The prairie above you has been erased and redrawn in white. When you finally sit up, your breath blooms into the air and lingers longer than before. The cold has reclaimed some ground. This is something settlers quickly learn to expect. Dugouts borrow warmth during the day and return it slowly at night, like a cautious lender who never forgets a debt. You rub your hands together and blow into them, the sound oddly loud in the low space. Your movements stir the air and a faint shimmer of frost appears along the far wall, where moisture is frozen into delicate patterns. It looks almost intentional, like nature decorating the inside of your shelter when no one is watching. Accounts from the 1800s make clear that frost inside dugouts was not unusual during hard winters, especially before a stove was installed. Settlers described waking to walls glittering faintly breath, crystallizing in the dim light. You had read those words once and imagined discomfort. Sitting here now, you understand it as a warning. The dugout protects, but it never forgets that winter is in charge. You swing your legs over the edge of your bedding and place your boots on the floor. They are stiff, the leather cold and uncooperative. You work them onto your feet, slowly flexing your toes inside until feeling creeps back in. Removing boots at night is a gamble here. Comfort now versus survival later. You chose survival. As you stand, a faint crackle comes from the ceiling. You freeze. Your eyes move upward, heart quickening. Another sound follows softer, more like a sigh. Then nothing. After a moment, you realize it is frost shifting tiny crystals responding to the temperature change as your body warms the air. There is ongoing disagreement among historians about how much settlers truly understood these sounds. Some argue people learned to distinguish harmless settling from real danger. Others suggest fear blurred the difference. Standing here, heart still thudding, you suspect experience mattered more than knowledge. Familiar sounds become less frightening simply because they repeat without consequence. You kneel and light the stove, coaxing a flame from reluctant kindling. The fire catches slowly, a dull glow spreading across the metal. You keep it small, disciplined. Too much heat too fast could cause trouble above. The balance between warmth and caution becomes second nature quicker than you expect. As the dugout warms, the frost along the walls softens and disappears, turning back into moisture that slides downward in quiet trails. You watch it happen, feeling oddly responsible as though your presence alone changes the state of the world here. Heat brings relief, but it also brings dripping ceilings and damp bedding. There is no winning, only managing. One unexpected practice mentioned in several frontier journals involved sleeping with a scarf or cloth loosely tied over the mouth and nose. Not for modesty, but to warm inhaled air and reduce the sting of cold breaths. You try it now, pulling fabric up over your face. The air you breathe becomes softer, less biting. Small adjustments like this begin to feel like clever victories. You eat breakfast slowly, fingers wrapped around a tin cup that steals heat almost as fast as it gives it. The smell of warm food mixes with smoke and damp soil, creating a scent that will soon define home for you. It is not pleasant, but it is steady. As daylight strengthens, you notice how little light actually enters the dugout. Even at midday, shadows cling to corners. This dimness shapes sleep in subtle ways. Many settlers wrote about losing track of time during winter days and nights blurring together underground. You can already feel that happening. Without sunlight to anchor, your rest comes when exhaustion demands it, not when clocks suggest it should. You lie back down after eating, not fully asleep, just resting. The floor radiates cold, steadily pulling heat from your body. You shift again, placing an extra layer beneath your spine. Every adjustment is deliberate now. You're learning the map of discomfort and navigating around it. A curious note from one homesteader described how children often slept more soundly than adults in dugouts, even during the coldest nights. Fatigue overcame fear and youth adapted faster. You think about that as you close your eyes, wondering whether adaptation is something you grow into or something hardship forces upon you. Your breathing slows, the stove ticks softly as it cools, drips resume their quiet rhythm. Above you, snow remains piled thick, pressing downward without complaint. The roof holds. Sleep returns in segments stitched together by brief waking moments. Each time you surface, the dugout feels a little more familiar, less threatening, not kinder, just known. By the time night edges back in, you realize something has changed. You no longer feel like a visitor here. The dugout has stopped being a temporary hole in the ground and started becoming a place you understand. That understanding does not make it comfortable. It makes it survivable. You pull your blankets close, tuck the scarf back over your face and settle in. The cold waits patiently as it always does. But tonight you are better prepared for its quiet persistence. You wake to the faint metallic tick of cooling iron. The stove has gone quiet again, its brief warmth already a memory. The dugout has returned to its usual state, cold but not hostile, the air resting heavily around you. Your breath forms a slow cloud and fades, and you stay still, listening to the sound of your own body settling. Sleep comes differently now. It no longer startles you awake at every shift of earth or a whisper of wind. Instead, you drift in and out aware, but not alarmed. This is one of the small adaptations settlers rarely celebrated but quietly relied on. Rest becomes lighter, but more frequent. You take it where you can. You sit up and rub warmth back into your arms. The walls look darker today, their surface slick in places where condensation has gathered. Moisture clings, stubbornly refusing to be ignored. Many frontier families learned quickly that dryness was as valuable as warmth. Damp bedding chilled faster, mold crept in unseen, and coughs lingered longer. Dugout solved one problem and introduced another. A widely acknowledged detail from period accounts is that dugout residents often whitewashed or lined their walls with fabric paper, or even thin boards when possible. The goal was not beauty, but separation. Anything that created a barrier between skin and soil helped. You imagine how different this space might feel, with even a thin layer of cloth softening the earth. You add fuel to the stove again, careful and measured. The fire responds obediently, a small orange glow spreading across the iron. You angle yourself toward it, turning one side of your body closer than the other, like a piece of bread browning unevenly. This dance becomes familiar quickly. Warm the hands, warm the feet, never linger too long. As the air warms, the dugout releases a faint earthy smell, deeper now richer. It mixes with smoke and wool, creating a scent that feels strangely grounding. Some settlers later wrote that they missed this smell after leaving the frontier. It reminded them they had endured something real, something close to the land. You step outside briefly to clear snow from the entrance. The world above is blindingly bright sunlight bouncing off fresh drifts. The cold outside you feels sharper now by comparison, cutting through your coat and biting your cheeks. You hurry back underground, grateful for the muted air waiting inside. This contrast between inside and out was something pioneers noted often. Even when temperatures remained brutally low, dugouts provided a psychological refuge. The earth softened extremes. It gave you a place to retreat, even if that place was imperfect. Some researchers remain divided on whether this sense of refuge mattered as much as physical warmth, but living it now, you suspect it mattered a great deal. Back inside, you notice how sound behaves differently than it did above ground. Your footsteps are dull, absorbed. Your voice, when you speak to yourself, just to hear it, sounds quieter, closer. The dugout keeps secrets well. It does not echo your fears back at you. A curious practice mentioned in a few letters involved placing a small pan of water near the stove to add humidity intentionally. Settlers believed it reduced coughing and nosebleeds caused by dry, heated air. The idea seems backwards in a place already struggling with dampness, but you understand the instinct. Comfort is relative here. Relief from one irritation is worth the risk of another. You settle back onto your bedding, not to sleep just yet, but to rest your eyes. The ceiling hovers inches above you, familiar now. You notice patterns in the sod where roots twist and overlap. Tiny bits of grass still cling to life on the underside, frozen in place. It feels like sleeping beneath a quiet field. There has been long-standing discussion among scholars about whether dugouts represented failure or ingenuity. Some argue they symbolize the harsh limits of frontier life. Others see them as clever solutions shaped by environment and necessity. Lying here, you find the argument oddly abstract. The dugout is not an idea. It is a reality that holds or fails. Tonight it holds. As evening approaches, again the temperature drops steadily. The stove burns low and you let it. Fuel is precious. You pull on extra layers and move less, conserving heat. Movement creates warmth briefly, but stillness preserves it longer. You prepare for sleep with the same quiet routine you've already developed. Boots loosened, but not removed. Scarf ready. Blankets arranged just so. Each action feels deliberate, almost ceremonial. These small rituals anchor you, giving shape to nights that might otherwise blur together. You lie down and listen. Somewhere outside, a distant sound carries across the snow, then fades. Maybe an animal, maybe wind moving across a ridge. It does not matter. The dugout absorbs it, leaving you with little more than silence and your own breath. Sleep arrives in soft waves. You drift, wake, drift again. Each time the dugout feels a little more like something you belong to. Not because it welcomes you, but because you have learned how to exist within it. By the time your breathing evens out, the stove is dark, the walls are damp, and the roof presses close. Winter remains in control, as tonight you have found your rhythm beneath it. You wake with the uncomfortable awareness that something is wrong, though it takes a few seconds to understand what it is. The dugout feels colder than it should. Not sharply so, not dangerously, but noticeably. The kind of cold that sneaks in quietly and settles where warmth used to linger. Your blanket feels ever stiffened by moisture that cooled overnight. When you move, the fabric makes a faint cracking sound as though it is reluctantly bending back into shape. You flex your fingers beneath it and feel how the chill clings longer this morning. This is one of those realities that frontier journals mention without much drama. Bedding rarely stayed dry for long in dugouts, especially during deep winter. Moisture crept in from breath from walls, from the ground itself. Once it settled into wool or hide, it was nearly impossible to drive out completely. You're learning that firsthand now. You sit up slowly, shoulders hunched, and rub your hands together. The walls around you look darker than usual, slick in places where condensation pooled overnight. A thin line of frost traces the base where wall meets floor. It glints faintly in the dim light, delicate and stubborn. You reach for your coat and pull it tighter around you, aware that sleep here is not just about rest. It is about maintaining body heat through long, motionless hours. Settlers often slept partially dressed for this reason, not out of discomfort alone, but out of necessity. Clothing became part of the bedding, layered strategically to trap air wherever possible. You light the stove again, coaxing flame from reluctant embers. It takes longer this morning. The wood resists damp from the cold air. When the fire finally catches, the heat feels immediate and fleeting all at once. You warm your hands, then your feet rotating slowly, careful not to scorch yourself on the iron. As warmth returns, the dugout reacts. Moisture beads along the walls and begins its familiar descent. You watch it happen, resigned now rather than surprised. This cycle has already become predictable. Cold tightens everything. Heat loosens it again. A small but telling custom recorded in several frontier households involved hanging damp blankets as close to the stove as possible during the day, then rotating them at night. It was not enough to dry them completely, but even partial dryness mattered. You drape one blanket near the stove now and feel a faint warmth seep into the fibres. It will help at least a little. You eat slowly, chewing, deliberately, conserving energy. The dugout stays quiet, absorbing the sounds of your movements. Above you, snow remains packed thick, keeping the outside world at a distance. This insulation is doing its job well. The cold is steady rather than punishing. There is no full agreement among researchers about whether sod and earth shelters actually conserved heat more efficiently than small cabins with stoves. Measurements from the time were rare and imprecise. What does seem clear from letters and diaries is how people felt. Dugouts felt safer from wind. They felt calmer during storms. That perception alone may have been worth as much as any measurable difference. As the day wears on, you lie back down, not fully asleep, just resting. Your body has learned to accept these pauses wherever they appear. True rest comes in fragments, now stitched together between chores and vigilance. You notice how the dugout smells change subtly with the temperature. When cold dominates, the scent sharpens the mineral and clean. When warmth returns, it deepens damp and organic. Soil, smoke, wool, and human presence blend into something that feels almost alive. It is not pleasant, but it is familiar. You drift into shallow sleep and wake again when a drop of water lands on your cheek. It startles you more from surprise than discomfort. You wipe it away and adjust your position, slightly rolling toward the drier side of the space. Over time, settlers became experts at mapping the interior of their dugouts by moisture alone. You're beginning to understand how. Night arrives quietly. There is no dramatic change, just a gradual dimming as light fades from the doorway. You block it again with cloth ceiling and what little warmth remains. The dugout grows close and dim but not oppressive. You lie back and listen. Somewhere above, snow shifts slightly settling under its own weight. The sound is low and distant, like a sigh travelling through layers of earth. You tense briefly, then relax. This sound has become familiar too. There is a persistent question among historians about how much fear shaped frontier sleep. Some argue settlers lived in constant anxiety, while others suggest fear dulled over time, replaced by routine. Lying here now, you know the answer is not simple. Fear never leaves entirely, it just stops shouting. You pull your scarf up over your face again, warming the air you breathe. Each inhale feels softer. Each exhale clouds and fades. Your body begins to sink into the bedding, stiff blanket and all. You think briefly of a spring of thawing ground and dripping ceilings turning into streams. That will bring its own challenges. But tonight winter still holds the land tight, and that firmness keeps the dugout stable. Your breathing slows. The stove ticks softly as it cools. Moisture gathers, drips, pauses. The roof remains solid above you, pressed down by snow and expectation. Sleep comes again light but persistent. Not the deep rest of safety, but the functional rest of endurance. And as you drift, wrapped in layers that never quite dry, you understand something important. Warmth in a dugout is never complete. It is partial, borrowed, temporary. But night after night, that is enough. You wake to the sound of air moving where you did not expect it. Not a howl, not even a whistle, just a soft, persistent seep that brushes your cheek like a cold breath. Your eyes open at once. In a dugout, unfamiliar airflow always means one thing: a gap has opened somewhere. You sit up slowly, keeping your movements measured. Panic wastes heat. You listen again. The sound is faint but steady, coming from the corner near the doorway. The wind has found a weakness you missed, a place where packed earth has loosened, or cloth has shifted. Frontier records often mention that dugouts were never truly sealed. No matter how carefully they were built, the prairie wind always found a way in. Settlers learned to hunt drafts the way sailors hunted leaks, by feel rather than sight. You extend your hand and let your fingers hover near the wall. There it is, a thin ribbon of cold sliding inward. You stuff spare cloth into the gap, pressing it tight with numb fingers. The wind resists briefly, then quiets. The dugout settles again. This small victory feels outsized. On the plain, stopping the wind matters almost as much as stopping the cold itself. You stay still for a moment, making sure the fix holds. Your breath slows. The ceiling remains silent. Snow above you continues its quiet work, weighing down the sod and sealing smaller cracks you cannot reach from inside. One improvised trick noted in a few settler diaries involved rubbing tallow or grease into cloth used for sealing gaps. The idea was to stiffen the fabric and block airflow more effectively. It was messy, unpleasant, and often smelled terrible, but it worked. You consider it, briefly wrinkling your nose at the thought, then decide it can wait until daylight. You lie back down, but sleep does not return immediately. Your awareness stays sharp, tuned to the dugout itself. You feel how the air moves, how warmth pulls near the ceiling and thins near the floor. Heat behaves differently underground. It does not rise and vanish the way it does in a cabin. It lingers but unevenly. This unevenness shaped how people slept. Many accounts describe settlers positioning themselves diagonally across dugouts, chasing the faint pockets of warmth that formed in corners. You shift slightly, testing the space. Your shoulder finds a spot that feels marginally less cold. You make a note of it for tomorrow night. There is no consensus among researchers about whether drafts caused more discomfort in dugouts than in surface homes. Cabins leaked too often badly. The difference here is proximity. In a dugout, the walls are always within reach. Every floor feels personal. You drift again, then wake when your foot brushes something cold and solid. A stone you carried in earlier has lost all its heat. You push it aside with your toe, annoyed then amused at yourself. Even the things meant to help eventually surrender to winter. Morning comes quietly. There is no sunrise to watch from bed, only a subtle brightening near the doorway. You sit up and stretch joints, stiff muscles reluctant. Sleep has been thin again, but it has done its job. You're still here. You clear snow from the entrance once more. The wind outside is stronger now, slicing across the prairie and lifting fine grains of ice into the air. It finds your face instantly sharp and unforgiving. You retreat underground with relief sealing the opening behind you. Inside the dugout feels calmer by comparison. This contrast is something many settlers remarked on. Even when conditions remained harsh, being out of the wind felt like winning. The earth muffled chaos. It turned the open plains into something manageable. You reinforce the doorway with extra cloth and a plank wedged at an angle. Each improvement makes the space feel slightly more deliberate, less accidental. You are no longer just occupying a hole in the ground, you're shaping it. As the stove warms the air, you notice how the walls respond. Moisture gathers and slides, but less dramatically than before. The added insulation helps. Small changes matter here. They stack quietly over time. A detail that sounds implausible until you try it yourself involves sleeping with your head closer to the wall rather than the centre of the room. The earth retains warmth more consistently than the air, especially overnight. You test the idea during an afternoon rest. Your temple against packed soil feels cold at first, then strangely neutral. Not warm, but steady. You file the sensation away. As evening approaches, the wind outside rises to a low roar. You hear it pass over the dugout, testing edges, tugging at anything loose. Inside, the sound is dulled, transformed into a distant rush rather than a threat. The roof stays quiet. Snow above remains firm. There's been long-standing discussion among scholars about how settlers mentally process these sounds. Some suggest constant noise heightened stress. Others believe the muffled quality underground actually reduced it. Lying here now, you find the muted rush oddly soothing. It reminds you the storm exists without forcing you to face it directly. Night settles again. You block the doorway carefully, checking for leaks. You add a final piece of cloth to the spot that betrayed you earlier. The dugout feels sealed as it will ever be. You lie down and adjust your blankets, now stiff but familiar. Your body remembers where to place weight, where to avoid pressure points. This is learned knowledge earned one night at a time. Your breath warms behind the scarf. The stove fades. The walls darken. Drips slow as the temperature evens out. Above you, wind and snow argue with the prairie and slowly lose their edge. Sleep comes in fragments again, but they knit together more smoothly tonight. Each waking moment is shorter. Each return to rest quicker. You are learning how to sleep here, not comfortably, but effectively. By the time your breathing evens out, the draft you noticed earlier is gone. The dugout holds steady. The earth presses close, imperfect but reliable. And for another winter night, that is enough. You wake to a sound that does not belong entirely to the dugout or the world above it. It is a faint rustling, almost polite, like something trying not to be noticed. Your eyes open at once. In a space this small, every unfamiliar noise feels close. You stay still and listen. The sound comes again, a soft scrape followed by a pause. Then another. It is not the wind this time. The air is still. The roof is quiet. Whatever it is moving. This is something frontier families rarely dramatized in their writing, but they mentioned it often enough. Dugouts attracted life. Not large animals, not usually, but smaller ones drawn by warmth, food and shelter. Mice, voles, sometimes snakes in warmer months. In winter, mostly mice. You exhale slowly and shift just enough to peer toward the corner near your supplies. The sound stops. You wait. After a few seconds, it resumes quicker now, more confident. Tiny claws against packed dirt. You sigh not with fear, but with tired acceptance. This is part of the arrangement. You share space here. The earth belongs to many things, and you are only one of them. A small but revealing detail found in several homestead letters describes how settlers learned to sleep through these sounds. At first, every scratch brought panic. Later, it became background noise like wind or dripping water. Tonight, you are somewhere in between, alert but not alarmed. You pull your blanket closer and turn slightly away from the sound. The mouse, sensing no threat, resumes its quiet exploration. You hear it pause, sniff, then retreat. The sound fades into nothing. Sleep tries to return, but your mind lingers on the idea of unseen movement. The dugout suddenly feels more alive than before. Walls that aren't wet, roofs that breathe, now creatures that slip through cracks you cannot see. There's a long-running disagreement among researchers about whether dugout living increased encounters with pests compared to cabins. Some argue the earth walls invited burrowing animals. Others point out that grain stores and warmth drew them regardless of shelter type. Lying here now, the distinction feels academic. The mouse does not care what kind of house this is. You drift again half asleep when another sound rises. This one is softer, more distant. A low, steady sigh that seems to move around you other than toward you. You recognize it after a moment. Wind pushing snow across the surface above the vibration travelling through layers of sod and soil. This sound is different from wind overhead in a cabin. It does not rattle or knock. It presses and slides like fabric being smoothed by the unseen hands. Some settlers described it as the sound of the land breathing. Others found it unsettling. Tonight it feels oddly neutral. You lie still and let the sound pass over you. It reminds you how insulated you are down here, wrapped in earth and snow. The storm exists, but it is filtered. You're aware of it without being exposed to it. Morning comes without ceremony. The light near the doorway grows slightly brighter enough to register through closed eyes. You wake with stiffness in your neck and shoulders, muscles complaining quietly. Sleep has been shallow, again interrupted by sound and thought, but it has carried you through. You sit up and stretch, carefully listening as your joints protest. The dugout smells the same as always now. Earth, smoke, wool, and something faintly animal. You no longer wrinkle your nose. This smell means shelter. It means continuity. You clear the doorway and let fresh air spill in. The outside world looks unchanged, a wide white plain under a pale sky. Sound travels differently out there, sharp and immediate. You feel exposed the moment you step out, as though the cold has been waiting for you. Back inside, you notice how quiet the dugout feels by comparison. Even with its small inhabitants and dripping walls, it holds silence better than the open land. This quiet shapes your sleep as much as warmth ever could. A curious habit mentioned in one winter account involved settlers humming softly before sleep, not for comfort exactly, but to claim the space. The sound reassured them they were not alone in the dark. You hum briefly now, low and steady. The sound dies quickly, absorbed by the earth. As evening returns, the mouse does not reappear. Or maybe it does, but you no longer notice. You prepare for sleep with the same routine you have practiced all week. Adjust blankets, check gaps, feed the stove lightly, everything in its place. There is ongoing discussion among historians about how isolation affected frontier sleep. Some argue loneliness worsened rest. Others suggest the quiet simplicity improved it. Lying here now, you feel both. The dugout is isolating, but it is also focused. There is nothing to distract you from the basic act of surviving the night. You lie down and listen once more. Drips fall slowly. The roof remains steady. Snow presses down gently. Somewhere in the walls, life stirs and settles. Your breathing evens out. Your thoughts soften. The dugout fades from something you are inside to something you are part of. Sleep comes again, imperfect but persistent. And as it does, the sounds around you no longer feel like intrusions. They feel like proof that life continues quietly, even in the cold. You wake to the sound of water falling where water should not be. It is not loud, not urgent, just steady enough to pull you out of sleep one drop at a time. Your eyes open, and in the dim light you see it happening above you. A bead of moisture gathers on the ceiling swells, then lets go. It lands near your shoulder with a soft, cold tap. You exhale slowly and shift away from it, already knowing this will not be the last drop. The dugout feels warmer than the air outside, but warmth has a habit of inviting trouble underground. When heat builds even slightly, the ceiling responds. Packed soil releases what it has been holding, and gravity does the rest. This is not a surprise anymore. It is part of the nightly rhythm. You sit up and watch for a moment, tracking the pattern. The drops do not fall everywhere, only in certain spots where warmth gathers near the roof. Over time, people learn these patterns well enough to arrange beds around them. You slide your bedding a few inches to the left, away from the worst of it. The dripping continues, but now it misses you. Letters from the plains often describe ceilings that seem to rain indoors, especially after a fire burned too hot. Settlers wrote about waking to damp hair and chilled shoulders, then learning to manage heat more carefully. It was not about comfort. It was about staying dry enough to sleep at all. You wipe the wall with a rag more out of habit than hope. The cloth comes away dark and wet. You wring it out into a tin pan and set the pan aside. It will fill slowly by morning. This small act feels oddly satisfying. You cannot stop the moisture, but you can direct it. There is quiet disagreement among modern researchers about how dangerous this dampness truly was. Some believe it played a major role in winter illness. Others argue cold air mattered more than wet walls. Sitting here now, watching water collect where your breath warmed the ceiling, you suspect the body did not care which was worse. It felt both. You lie back down and pull your blanket tighter, careful to keep it away from the drip line. The fabric is already cool to the touch. Once damp, it will stay that way for hours. You tuck your arms inside your coat sleeves and breathe slowly through the scarf at your face. The dripping becomes background noise, joining the soft tick of the stove and the distant hush of wind beyond the sod roof. It is almost rhythmic. Not soothing exactly, but predictable. Predictability counts for a lot in winter. At some point the dripping slows. The ceiling cools as the fire dies and moisture freezes in place again. Silence returns. You fall back into sleep without noticing when it happens. Morning brings stiffness and a dull ache in your shoulders. You sit up carefully and test the air. Colder now. The dugout has given back what little warmth it borrowed. The pan beside you holds a shallow pool of water frozen solid. You tap it with your finger and feel the cold bite. This water came from you, from your breath, from your fire, from the earth responding to both. The thought feels strange and intimate. You clear the doorway and let fresh air rush in. Outside, the prairie looks unchanged, wide and pale under a low sky. The wind is light today, almost gentle. You stand there for a moment, breathing deeply, then retreat underground again. Even on calmer days, the open land feels exposed after nights beneath it. Back inside, you rearrange your space. You move bedding again. Place the pan more carefully. Hang the damp rag closer to the stove. Each adjustment makes the dugout feel less accidental, more lived in. This is how people stayed sane here, by shaping small details they could control. A small detail noted in one winter journal described settlers carving shallow channels into their ceilings to guide dripping water away from sleeping areas. It was crude and imperfect, but it worked well enough. You consider trying it later, imagining how careful you would have to be not to weaken the roof. Everything here is a balance. As evening approaches, you light the stove with restraint. Just enough heat to take the edge off. You watch the ceiling closely, noting where moisture begins to gather. The dugout responds exactly as it did before. No surprises. That feels like progress. There is no single answer among historians about whether people ever truly got used to this kind of living. Some accounts suggest they adapted fully. Others imply they endured it until something better came along. Lying here now, you feel that both can be true. You're adapting, yes, but endurance still plays a role. Night returns quietly. You block the doorway, check your drip pan and settle in. The ceiling looms close, dark and familiar. The walls smell of damp earth and smoke. Your blanket rustles softly as you pull it up around into your shoulders. A drop falls once, then another, then stops. You smile faintly at the dark. You have learned where to lie. Your breathing slows, the stove cools, moisture freezes back into stillness. Above you, snow presses down evenly, sealing the dugout into a compact, silent pocket. Sleep comes again light but steady. The sound of dripping fades into memory. And as the night deepens, you rest knowing that even the ceiling with all its flaws is something you now understand. You wake with your boots still on and are briefly grateful for the decision. Your feet are cold, yes, but they are not numb. The leather has softened slightly overnight from the faint warmth inside the dugout, and when you wiggle your toes, sensation answers back slowly, stubbornly, but reliably. You sit up and stretch, feeling the familiar protest along your spine. The ceiling waits inches above you unchanged. The walls hold their shape. Nothing dramatic has happened while you slept, and that feels like a quiet success. Clothing worn to bed becomes less about modesty and more about strategy here. Layers matter. Wool closest to the skin, thicker fabric over that. Coats doubled as blankets, hats pulled low, scarves repurposed again and again. People on the frontier learned quickly that undressing fully at night was an indulgence winter rarely allowed. Warmth lost during sleep was hard to recover by morning. You run your hands along your sleeves and feel where the fabric is stiff with dried moisture. It crackles faintly as you move, not frozen now, just hardened like it remembers being wet. You flex your arms, warming it with the movement, then pause to let your breathing steady. The dugout smells deeper today, heavier than before. Earth smoke, wool, and the faint trace of yesterday's food all linger together. This blend settles into everything over time. Period description suggests people stopped noticing it after a while unless they left and returned. Then it struck them all at once. You suspect this smell will follow you even if you ever leave. You feed the stove carefully, keeping the flame small. The iron warms and ticks softly. Heat creeps into the air, slow and cautious. You rotate your body toward it, warming one side then the other patient now. You no longer expect instant comfort. You accept gradual improvement. As the dugout warms, you feel moisture rise again, but less dramatically. You have learned restraint. A small fire means fewer drips, fewer damp spots, fewer problems later. This kind of moderation appears often in frontier routines. People learned when not to push for more heat, more light, more comfort. Winter punished excess. You think about how sleep has changed since you arrived here. It is no longer a single stretch of unconsciousness. It comes in segments. Doze, wake, adjust, doze again. Accounts from the time describe this pattern without complaint as if it was simply understood. Long uninterrupted sleep was a luxury of safer places. You lie back down for a while after eating boots still on coats still wrapped around you. The floor radiates cold steadily. It does not surprise you anymore. You place a folded blanket beneath your calves and feel the difference immediately. Small adjustments like this begin to feel instinctive. There is a recurring question in historical writing about whether people slept better once they accepted discomfort as normal. Some suggest mental adaptation mattered as much as physical shelter. Lying here now, you find that acceptance does not remove the cold or the stiffness. It removes resistance. You stop fighting what cannot be changed and focus on what can. Your thoughts drift as you rest. You think of others sleeping like this across the plains, families with children, curled together for warmth. Single men stretched out in narrow spaces, women waking through the night to tend fires or check on roofs during storms. Dugouts were rarely solitary experiences even when occupied by one person at a time. They existed as part of a shared way of living. A lesser-known habit mentioned in one account involved stuffing spare clothing into boots overnight to keep them from freezing solid. You try it now, pushing rolled socks deep into the toes. In the morning you will thank yourself. Winter rewards foresight more than effort. As afternoon fades, light grows thinner at the doorway. You block it again, sealing yourself into the dim interior. The dugout responds by growing quieter, the outside world receding. This transition feels familiar now, almost comforting in its predictability. You settle into your bedding earlier tonight, body tired in a deeper way than before. Not just muscle tired, but mentally worn down by constant vigilance. This kind of fatigue runs deeper and lasts longer. It demands rest even when conditions are not ideal. You lie on your side knees, drawn slightly up, conserving heat. Your boots rest against the wall leather, cold but manageable. The scarf covers your mouth and nose. Each breath warms slightly before reaching your lungs. This small trick makes a surprising difference. Above you, snow shifts subtly, not falling, not collapsing, just settling under its own weight. The sound is low and distant, more felt than heard. You pause listening, then let it fade into the background. There is disagreement among historians about how often people genuinely feared sleeping in dugouts versus how often they simply endured them. Fear is difficult to measure across time. What you feel now is not fear. It is awareness. The roof exists. The cold exists. You exist alongside them. Condensation gathers again near the ceiling, but you have positioned yourself well. No drops land on you tonight. The stove cools gradually, its ticking slowing, then stopping altogether. Darkness thickens. Your breathing evens out. Your body sinks into the bedding, stiff but familiar. The dugout holds steady. The earth presses close without shifting. Sleep comes again, deeper than the night before. Still not luxurious, still not complete, but more continuous. Your body has learned the rhythm. When to relax, when to stay alert, when to surrender. As you drift, one thought settles quietly in your mind. Sleeping dressed boots on layers stiff and imperfect is not a sign of failure here. It is a sign of understanding. Winter has its rules. Tonight you are following them. You wake with a smell before you wake with a thought. It is deeper than before, thicker, as though the dugout has decided to remind you exactly what it is made of. Damp soil, cold ash, wool that has absorbed too many nights. The scent sits heavy in the air, unmoving as if it has nowhere else to go. You breathe it in slowly, not because you enjoy it, but because resisting it feels pointless. The dugout has its own atmosphere, now shaped by your presence, but not controlled by it. You sit up carefully, testing the space with a glance. The ceiling remains close, the walls remain dark, everything is where you left it. This smell was something many settlers mentioned only in passing, but always with recognition. Earth shelters carried their environment inside them. You did not just live in the ground, you lived with it. Every breath reminded you of that fact. You stretch your arms and feel stiffness pull along your shoulders. Sleep was better last night, longer stretches stitched together with fewer interruptions. Still your body keeps score. It remembers every hard surface and cold draft. You rub warmth into your hands and bring them briefly to your face, letting heat linger where skin is most sensitive. The stove waits dark and patient. You feed it sparingly, coaxing flame rather than demanding it. The iron warms and releases that familiar metallic scent, sharp at first, then softening as heat spreads. You rotate toward it slowly, letting warmth reach you in stages. As the air warms, the dugout answers. Moisture begins to rise again, but more gently this time. You have learned where to watch. Small dark spots appear near the ceiling, but no drops fall yet. The balance holds. It becomes clear over time that dugouts required a different kind of attentiveness than cabins. In a framed house, problems announced themselves loudly. In an earth shelter, they whispered. You had to notice changes in smell and sound and temperature. Many frontier families wrote that they felt more aware of their surroundings underground, as if the walls demanded attention in exchange for protection. You kneel and wipe a section of wall with a cloth, removing a thin film of dampness. The dirt beneath feels cool and solid. This small act does not change much, but it makes the space feel cared for. That matters more than you expected. A small detail that appears in a few winter journals describes settlers scattering ash or dry sand along the base of dugout walls. The material absorbed moisture and reduced mud underfoot. You try it now, sprinkling a thin line where wall meets floor. The effect is immediate and satisfying. The ground looks cleaner, firmer. You eat easily, savouring warmth more than flavour. Food tastes different in the cold. Texture matters. Heat matters. You linger over the last swallow, letting it warm your throat before it disappears. You lie back down afterward, not to sleep but to rest. The dugout remains dim even in midday shadows pooling in corners. Time feels stretched here unmarked by clocks or sun angles. Rest comes when your body demands it, not when hours suggest it should. There is quiet disagreement among historians about whether the loss of clear timekeeping affected settlers mentally. Some suggest it deepened isolation. Others believe it encouraged a healthier rhythm, tied to bodily needs rather than schedules. Lying here now, you feel the days blending together, in a way that is neither alarming nor comforting. It simply is. You drift into light sleep and wake again to the sound of your own movement. The dugout absorbs noise so thoroughly that even small shifts feel loud. You adjust your position, careful not to disturb the ceiling or brush against damp patches along the wall. As afternoon fades, the temperature drops again, the stove has cooled. You pull your coat tighter and sit still, conserving warmth. Movement is a choice now weighed against energy. Settlers often wrote about learning when not to move. Stillness in winter could be as important as work. You prepare for night earlier than before. The routine has become familiar. Check the doorway, stuff cloth into small gaps, arrange bedding to avoid drip lines, set boots where they can be reached without standing. Each step feels practiced, almost automatic. The dugout smells stronger again as evening settles in. Without airflow, scents concentrate. Earth smoke and human presence layer themselves thicker. You notice it more tonight, perhaps because you're more aware of the space itself. This is not a neutral shelter. It reacts to you. A curious note in one account describes settlers burning small amounts of sage or dried grass inside dugouts, not for ceremony, but to mask odours and freshen the air. You consider the idea, then dismiss it. Smoke already clings to everything here. Adding more feels unnecessary. Night arrives without fanfare. The world outside grows quiet again, snow and wind settling into a low distant hush. Inside the dugout feels sealed and closed, almost separate from the land above. You lie down and pull blankets, close boots still on body angled slightly toward the wall, where the temperature feels most stable. There remains no full agreement among researchers about whether dugouts felt more claustrophobic over time or less. Some accounts suggest people grew increasingly aware of the walls closing in. Others imply the opposite, that familiarity softened the sense of confinement. Tonight you feel neither trapped nor free. You feel placed. Condensation gathers again near the ceiling, but slowly. No drops fall. The stove cools. The air steadies. Your breathing warms the space just enough to matter. You close your eyes and listen. Not for danger, not anymore, but for confirmation. The roof remains quiet. The walls hold. The earth stays where it is. Sleep comes in a gentle slide rather than a sudden drop. Your thoughts loosen. The smell of earth fades into background awareness. Your body settles into the routine it has learned. As you drift, you realize that the dugout no longer feels temporary in the way it once did. It is not comfortable. It is not kind. But it is consistent. And in a frontier winter, consistency is a form of mercy. You wake with the sense that you are not alone even before you understand why. It is not a sound this time, not a drip or a scrape or the settling of snow. It is warmth, a subtle shift in the air, a softness that was not there when you fell asleep. Your eyes open slowly. The dugout looks the same, close and dim, but the cold has eased its grip. Not gone, just loosened. You breathe in and feel the difference immediately. Your chest does not tighten as it did before. The air feels thicker, shared. If you were not alone out here, this is when you would notice it most. Bodies change spaces. Even one more person adds heat breath movement. Dugouts were often built small for a reason. Warmth multiplied quickly when people slept close together. You imagine how different this space would feel with another shape beside you, another rhythm of breathing to sync with your own. You sit up and stretch your elbow, brushing the wall. The earth is cool but no longer biting. You press your palm flat against it for a moment, curious. The temperature feels steady, neither warm nor cold. This is the kind of balance settlers quietly relied on, even if they never described it in neat terms. You think about shared shelters on the frontier, families packed into spaces barely larger than this, travellers taking turns sleeping closest to the stove, children curled together like kittens generating warmth simply by existing. Privacy was rare, survival was not. The dugout smells different this morning, not stronger but blended. Earth and smoke still dominate, but there is a softness to it now, a warmth that carries scent differently. You notice it and then stop noticing it already adapting. You feed the stove lightly, more out of habit than need. The fire responds a small glow rather than a blaze. You have learned restraint. You do not chase heat anymore, you manage it. As you eat, you sit closer to the wall than before, back resting against packed soil. The contact feels grounding. Cold seeps in slowly, evenly, without shock. You realize this is where you sleep best. Not in the center, not under the highest point of the ceiling, but tucked near the earth itself. Some people swore this worked. Others dismissed it as an imagination. You do not care either way, your body relaxes faster here, and that is enough. You rest after eating, not fully asleep, eyes half closed. The dugout holds sound tightly. Even your breathing feels private. Time stretches again, unarced and gentle. You lose track of how long you lie there listening to nothing in particular. When you do drift into sleep, it is deeper than before. Not perfect, but heavier. You dream of weight pressing down in a comforting way. Blankets, snow, earth, nothing moving, nothing threatening. You wake again when your leg cramps slightly muscle protesting the cold. You shift carefully, massaging it until sensation returns. These small pains are constant companions now, not injuries, just reminders that the body has limits. You adjust your bedding and settle back in. The dugout responds by staying exactly as it is. No new sounds, no surprises. That steadiness feels earned. As evening approaches, you notice how little you dread night now. It is still cold, still closer, still demanding, but it is no longer unknown. The dugout has revealed its habits. You know where it drips, where it holds heat, where it stays quiet. You prepare for sleep with practiced ease. Nothing rushed, nothing wasted. Every movement has a reason. The routine itself becomes calming, like a signal to your body that it is time to let go. You lie down and pull the blankets close. Your boots rest near your feet, ready if needed. Your scarf covers your face, softening each breath. The wall at your back feels steady and reliable. Above you, the roof remains silent. Snow presses down gently, doing its quiet work. The outside world fades again, reduced to a distant idea, rather than an immediate presence. You close your eyes and let your breathing slow. The dugout holds its shape. The air holds your warmth. The earth holds everything else. Sleep arrives without argument this time, and as you drift, you realize something important. Sleeping here is no longer about enduring the night. It is about sharing space with it. Letting the cold exist without fighting it. Letting the earth stay close without fear. For now, that understanding is enough. You wake to sound layered beneath sound, not just one thing, but several overlapping softly. At first your mind tries to name them. Wind maybe, snow shifting, something small moving where it should not. Then you stop trying to label it and simply listen. The dugout is very quiet, but it is not so silent. The earth carries noise differently than open air. It bends, it dulls, it stretches it out. What reaches you is softened as though the world is speaking through cloth. You lie still, eyes open, letting the sounds arrange themselves. There is a faint creak, slow and patient like weight settling, snow adjusting to itself above the roof. Then a barely audible scratching, brief and tentative, coming from somewhere behind the wall near your feet. Not close enough to touch, close enough to notice. You breathe slowly and wait. These sounds used to pull you fully awake. Now they hover at the edge of awareness. Your body has learned the difference between threat and presence. The dugout is not empty, and it never was. It exists inside a living landscape, and the land does not stop moving just because you're sleeping. You hear a low thump, muted and distant. Snow sliding off a drift. The vibration travels through sod and soil before it reaches you. The roof answers with a faint sigh and then settles. Nothing else happens. You relax again, the tension draining from your shoulders. People who live this way learn to read sound the way sailors read water. Not precisely, not perfectly, but well enough to know when to stay still and when to act. Some noises demanded attention. Others were simply the land reminding you it was still there. You turned slightly onto your side, ear angled toward the wall. The packed earth feels cool and solid against your shoulder. The soundscape shifts subtly. What was distant now feels closer though quieter. The dugout holds noise like it holds heat unevenly. Another small sound reaches you. A faint rustle, then a pause. You imagine a mouse navigating a tunnel just outside the wall, moving with the confidence of something that knows this place better than you ever will. It does not bother you anymore. You're not competing for the same things tonight. You drift again half asleep and wake to a different sound altogether. A long, low whisper that seems to slide across the ceiling. Wind moving snow across the surface. It does not roar. It does not knock. It presses and glides steady and unhurried. The difference between this and wind above a cabin is striking. There is no rattling, no sharp edges. The earth absorbs the force and hands you only what remains. It feels like listening to weather through a closed door. You stay awake for a while listening. Not because you are afraid, but because the sounds are strangely engaging. Each one carries information. Snow is deep. The roof is holding, the ground is firm, the world is cold but stable. Even you sleep returns. When you wake again, it is to a deeper quiet. The sounds beneath the snow have thinned. Whatever was moving has settled. The wind has slowed. Even the drip you had grown used to has paused. You sit up and stretch, joints, stiff muscles, slow to respond. The dugout feels heavy with stillness, as though the night has pressed everything into place. You clear the doorway and let light spill in. Outside the snow lies smooth and untouched. A pale blanket stretching in all directions. Sound behaves differently out here. Every movement feels louder, sharper. You shovel a narrow path and step back inside with relief. The dugout closes around you again and the quiet returns. Not absolute, but controlled. As you eat, you notice how your ears stay alert even while your hands work. You listen for changes automatically now. A new creak, a shift in tone, silence where there was once sound. This attentiveness is tiring in its own fun way, but it is also grounding. Keeps you connected to the place you are in rather than the place you imagine being. Later, when you lie down, again you pay attention to the sounds as they change with your position. Near the wall, noise feels closer but softer. Near the centre, it feels more distant but clearer. You adjust slightly, choosing what feels most reassuring. There is no single way people responded to these nightly sounds. Some accounts describe them as comforting proof that the earth was doing its job. Others describe them as the unsettling reminders of how thin the barrier really was. Your experience lands somewhere between the two. You are aware of the roof above you. You are aware of the snow on top of it. You are aware of the ground pressing in from all sides. But awareness does not have to mean fear. As evening returns, the wind picks up again. You hear it before you feel it, a distant movement carried through layers of earth. It never reaches you directly. It never has to. You prepare for sleep with the same quiet routine. Check the doorway, adjust the bedding, feed the stove lightly. Each action makes a soft sound absorbed almost immediately by the dugout. You lie down and listen. The snow speaks in its slow language. The earth answers by staying still, aware, nearby. Something small moves and then stops. Above you the roof holds without complaint. Your breathing slows, matching the steady pace of the sounds around you. They no longer pull you toward wakefulness. They guide you toward rest. Sleep arrives not by erasing sound, but by folding it into the background. The dugout does not promise silence. It promises steadiness. And tonight that steadiness carries you gently into sleep. You wake with a strange realization. The cold has not worsened overnight. It has not improved either, but it has stayed exactly where it was when you fell asleep. That steadiness catches your attention more than comfort ever could. You lie still for a moment, testing the air with a slow breath. It feels thick, held in place. The dugout has become something like a pocket sealed gently from the world above. Snow has piled higher during the night, and without seeing it, you feel its effect. This is one of those truths frontier people learned without needing to explain it. Deep snow could be a gift. It smothered sound. It blocked wind, pressed itself into cracks and seams that no hand or cloth could ever fully seal. Above your head now sits a heavy, quiet layer, doing work you could never manage alone. You sit up and notice how the ceiling feels closer somehow. Not lower, just more present. The weight above has changed the acoustics of the space. Your movements sound duller. Even your breathing seems to fade faster after each exhale. You reach up and touch the roof carefully. The sod feels firm and cold, but not shifting. Snow has settled into the grasses and roots above, locking everything together. You feel a cautious gratitude for it, even as you know the same weight could become dangerous if it overstays its welcome. People argued about this even then. Some welcomed heavy snow for the insulation it brought. Others feared it for what it might do to a roof built of earth and hope. Living under it, you understand both instincts. Comfort and danger share the same source. You light the stove briefly and let a small warmth spread. The dugout responds slowly, holding onto the heat instead of letting it vanish. Snow above keeps the warmth from escaping upward. It's not much, but it is enough to notice. Condensation behaves differently today. It gathers more slowly, and when it does, it seems unsure whether to fall or freeze. You watch one dark spot form and then fade again without dripping. That feels like progress. You eat and rest, letting the day pass quietly. Outside, the storm that built this snow layer has moved on. Inside, the results remain. The dugout feels steadier, quieter, almost insulated from time itself. When you lie down again, you notice how evenly the temperature holds. Your feet stay warmer longer. Your breath does not sting as sharply when you inhale. These are small differences, but small differences matter here. You drift into sleep earlier than usual, surprised by how quickly it arrives. The snow has wrapped the dugout in silence. Even the familiar sounds of settling and shifting have softened. At some point in the night, you wake briefly and realize you are warm enough not to shiver. Not warm, but stable. Your body relaxes in response muscles, unclenching without conscious effort. You fall back asleep almost immediately. When morning comes, it does so gently. Light seeps into the doorway, pale and diffused by snow. You sit up and feel rested in a way that surprises you. The night has passed with fewer interruptions than any before it. You step outside briefly and see how high the snow has risen, banked against the sides of the dugout like a protective wall. It looks peaceful from here, almost inviting. You know better than to trust it fully, but you appreciate what it has done. Back inside, you settle again, understanding something that would have sounded strange before. Snow, the very thing that threatens travel, food and safety, has made your sleep easier. The dugout rests beneath it, quiet and held together. And for now you rest too. You wake with your heart already awake, beating faster than it should. For a moment you do not know why. The dugout is dark, quiet, unchanged. Then you feel it. A subtle difference in the air, a pressure that feels heavier than before, as if the earth itself has leaned a little closer. You do not move right away. You listen. The roof does not crack. The walls do not shed dirt. Nothing falls. Still, the sensation lingers, a quiet warning that does not announce itself with noise. It is the kind of awareness that settles in after many nights spent beneath weight you cannot see. You breathe slowly, counting each breath, until your pulse eases. Fear down here does not arrive loudly. It arrives as imagination, as memory, as stories you have heard or half remembered. A roof that sagged after thaw, a winter storm that pressed too hard, a dugout that held until it did not. You sit up carefully, keeping your head low. The ceiling waits inches above you, close enough to touch without stretching. You raise your hand and rest your palm against it. The sod feels firm, cold, unmoving. You press gently, then stop. Testing too much invites trouble. You tell yourself what you already know. Snow has packed itself evenly above you. The ground is frozen solid. The roof has held through worse nights than this one. Knowing these things does not erase the feeling entirely, but it steadies it. You shift your weight and listen again. The dugout answers with tense. Not the fragile silence of emptiness, but the dense quiet of these sounds holding together. This fear does not visit every night. It comes and goes, shaped by weather, by exhaustion, by the mind's habit of wandering when the body rests. You have learned not to fight it directly. You let it exist, then move through it. You light the stove, keeping the flame low. The iron warms slowly, ticking softly as it expands. You watch the ceiling closely, tracking any change. Moisture gathers, but no dirt falls. The balance holds. As warmth spreads, your muscles loosen. You sit back against the wall and let your shoulders drop. The earth presses firm and steady against your back, not shifting, not responding. That contact reassures you more than sight ever could. You eat and rest, letting the day move quietly around you. Outside, the snow has begun to change. You can hear it faintly when you stand near the doorway. Not falling, not blowing, just settling under its own weight. The sound is slow and patient. You clear the entrance carefully, mindful of how much snow leans against the dugout now. You remove just enough to keep the doorway clear, leaving the rest to support the walls. Too much clearing invites cold air and drifting. Too little invites pressure. You work in small adjustments, trusting experience more than instinct. Inside again, the dugout feels unchanged, which feels like success. You lie down to rest, eyes open, watching the ceiling in the dim light. Your mind drifts, then returns to the same thought. What if? You let the thought pass without answering it. There is no useful response to it, not here, not now. As evening returns, the air grows colder and steadier. You light the stove one last time and then let it fade. Too much heat risks uneven thawing above. You have learned to respect the slow pace of winter. You prepare for sleep with extra care tonight, bedding positioned away from known weak spots, supplies within reach, boots placed where you can find them in the dark. These actions do not guarantee safety, but they offer readiness. You lie down and pull the blankets close. The ceiling hovers dark and familiar. The walls hold their shape. The ground beneath you feels solid, unyielding, reliable. Your breathing slows. The fear that woke you earlier has softened into watchfulness. You're not afraid in the way you once were. You're aware. At some point in the night you wake again. This time it is to a sound so faint you almost miss it. A gentle settling, like a deep exhale travelling through the roof. Snow adjusting, weight redistributing itself. You hold still listening. The sound does not repeat. Nothing follows it. The dugout remains steady. You realize your hands are clenched beneath the blankets. You loosen them deliberately, one finger at a time. Your body takes the cue and relaxes. Sleep returns cautious but willing. Morning comes quietly. You wake without the rush of fear this time. The ceiling looks the same. The walls are unchanged. The dugout has kept its shape through another night. You sit up and feel relief, not dramatic, not overwhelming, but real. The kind that settles deep in your chest and stays there. The fear of collapse never fully disappears. It becomes part of the background, like the cold, like the damp, like the low ceiling. It reminds you to move carefully, to listen closely, to respect the weight above you. You accept it the way you accept everything else here. The earth holds. For now, that is enough. Tough. You wake to light before you wake to sound. It slips into the dugout quietly, pale and thin, filtering through the doorway and catching in the faint haze that always seems to linger after a night indoors. Smoke from last evening's fire never fully leaves. It clings low, drifting lazily, turning morning light into something soft and diffuse. For a moment you lie still and watch it. The light does not come in beams or angles the way it would through a window. It spreads slow and even touching the wall first, then the floor, then finally your blankets. It feels gentle, almost kind. Your eyes sting slightly. Smoke does that after a few nights. You blink a few times and sit up, moving carefully so you do not stir the air too much. Any sudden motion sends the haze swirling again, making it harder to breathe. You have learned to rise slowly, letting the dugout wake with you. The smell is familiar now. Ash damp earth wool and the faint bitterness of old smoke. It settles in your throat but no longer surprises you. You take a shallow breath, then another, waiting for your lungs to adjust. This is how mornings begin here, not with freshness but with patience. You reach for the cloth near the doorway and pull it back just enough to let cooler air creep in. The smoke thins, reluctantly drawn toward the opening. It takes time. Everything underground takes time. You sit and wait, watching the light sharpen as the air clears. When you finally stand, the floor greets your feet with its usual cold firmness. You flex your toes inside your boots and feel the aches slightly. The dugout feels unchanged. Walls dark, ceiling close, everything in its place. That consistency feels grounding after a night spent listening for shifts. You light the stove, again carefully coaxing flame rather than forcing it. Smoke rises at once, curling upward before finding the pipe. For a moment it hesitates, then draws cleanly out. You nod to yourself. The draft is working today. Small victories matter. As the stove warms, the dugout brightens subtly. Not because the light increases, but because the smoke thins further, revealing details you had stopped noticing. The texture of the walls, the faint roots pressed into the sod overhead, the way moisture darkens certain patches more than others. You sit near the doorway and eat slowly, letting the morning settle. Outside, the prairie remains white and still. Snow reflects light upward, brightening the entrance far more than the sky alone could. You realize how much of your day now depends on reflection and echo. Light reflected from snow, heat reflected by earth, sound reflected inward by walls. You rest afterward, not sleeping, just letting your body exist without effort. The dugout holds warmth better in the morning, especially after a night when snow has stayed put. The air feels steady, not warm, but cooperative. There is something about smoke that changes sleep and waking alike. It softens edges. It blurs time. Settlers wrote about mornings that felt slow and dreamlike, especially when fires smouldered through the night. You understand that now. Even fully awake, part of you feels suspended between rest and action. You stretch your arms, carefully mindful of the ceiling. The ache in your shoulders lingers but fades with movement. You lean back against the wall and close your eyes briefly, letting the warmth from the stove reach you. The earth feels solid and unmoving at your back. That contact reassures you more than any amount of light. As the day progresses, the smoke finally clears enough that the dugout feels sharper again. Edges return, shadows deepen, the place feels more awake, more alert. You notice how different it feels compared to the hazy calm of morning. You step outside briefly and are struck again by how loud the world feels. Snow crunches underfoot. Wind whispers across open space. Your own breathing sounds exposed. You do what you need to do quickly and retreat underground, pulling the cloth back into place behind you. Inside, the dugout absorbs sound immediately. The quiet closes around you like a held breath. You realize how much you have come to rely on this muffling. It makes rest possible in a way the open land never could. You lie down again in the afternoon, letting light fade naturally. Smoke no longer hangs in the air, but its scent remains woven into everything. You doze lightly, waking once or twice, then sinking back down. As evening approaches, you repeat the routine that now feels second nature. Adjust the doorway, arrange bedding, check the ceiling, feed the stove just enough. The motions are calm and unhurried. Familiarity has softened the edges of necessity. Night returns, and with it the haze. Smoke curls, gently catching the last of the daylight before darkness settles fully. The dugout glows faintly lit by firelight and memory. Okay. You lie back and watch the ceiling disappear into shadow. The low space no longer feels oppressive. It feels known. You're breathing slow smoke warming the air just enough to matter. Sleep arrives gradually, like the smoke itself drifting in and settling without ceremony. And as you slip under the morning light, you woke to feels already distant, softened by the quiet consistency of the place that holds you through the night. You wake to the sound of ice answering touch. A dull crack, small and sharp at the same time, followed by silence. It takes a moment to place it. Then you see the tin cup near your bedding, its surface clouded and white. The water inside froze solid sometime in the night. This happens often now. Water left too close to the wall freezes. Water left too close to the stove does not. Learning where to place things becomes part of your evening routine, as automatic as pulling the scarf over your face or setting your boots within reach. Still winter enjoys reminding you when you forget. You sit up and take the cup in your hands, testing the weight. The ice inside is thick enough that it will take time to melt. You set it closer to the stove and return to your bedding, wrapping your arms around yourself while you wait. Nothing here is immediate. Even thirst requires patience. Breaking ice indoors becomes a quiet ritual. Some mornings you chip at it with the edge of a spoon. Other mornings you simply wait for warmth to do the work. Today you wait. The stove is already warming, its faint ticking the only sound in the dugout. You watch your breath rise and fade. The air feels colder than yesterday, not by much, but enough to notice. Cold like this does not attack. It settles. It seeps. It finds whatever is left unguarded. You rub your hands together and hold them over the stove, briefly careful not to linger. Heat here is always borrowed, never owned. Too much at once brings dripping ceilings and damp walls. Too little leaves you stiff and aching. You aim for the narrow space between. As the ice begins to sweat inside the cup, you lift it and take a cautious sip. The water is painfully cold, but it wakes you fully. You swallow and feel it settle heavy in your stomach. Warm drinks are rare luxuries. You make do with what you have. This is how days begin now. Wake, test the cold, restore what froze overnight. There is comfort in this repetition. Routine steadies the mind when the environment refuses to. You check the doorway and clear the thin crust of ice that formed along its edges. The cloth is stiff with frost. You flex it gently until it bends again, then tuck it back into place. Outside, the snow reflects pale light inward, brightening the dugout just enough to work. You eat slowly, savouring warmth more than taste. The food feels heavier in winter, as though your body knows it must hold on to every bit of energy it can get. You chew deliberately and rest between bites. Later, you lie back down, not to sleep, but to rest your joints. Cold settles into bones differently than it does into air. It lingers. You give your body time to adjust, letting warmth spread gradually rather than forcing it. Throughout the day, you repeat small tasks that feel almost pointless on their own. Move water closer to heat. Turn bedding. Shift supplies away from damp spots. Each action prevents a problem you might never see directly. This kind of maintenance does not announce itself. It only shows up when neglected. As evening approaches, the temperature drops again. You feel it first in your fingers, then in your shoulders. You prepare for night earlier than usual, knowing frozen water will greet you again by morning. You place the cup closer to the stove this time. You tuck spare cloth around it for insulation. These small choices feel like quiet victories. You lie down and pull blankets close. The dugout darkens. The stove fades. Water freezes slowly, almost politely, as though it knows you are watching. Sleep comes easier tonight, guided by routine rather than exhaustion. You have learned what to expect from the cold and what it expects from you, and as you drift, the dull crack of ice forming somewhere nearby no longer startles you. It simply marks the passing of another winter night. You wake and are unsure whether it is night or morning. The dugout offers no clear answer. The light near the doorway has not changed much, and the air feels the same as it did when you last opened your eyes. cold, steady, patient. This is how winter stretches time. Nights grow longer, not just on the clock, but in the body. Sleep fragments into pieces so small they are hard to count. You drift off surface drift again. Each waking moment feels complete on its own, disconnected from whatever came before. You lie still and listen to your breathing. It sounds louder than it should, echoing softly off walls that are too close to let sound escape. You slow it deliberately, matching your breath to the quiet around you. In the absence of daylight, rhythm replaces time. Your body knows it has not rested enough, even if your mind cannot say why. Muscles ache in a dull, spreading way. Not sharp pain, just weariness. The kind that settles deeper each night and never quite leaves. You sit up slowly and feel stiffness resist you. Your joints move reluctantly, as if they too are unsure what hour it is. You stretch carefully, mindful of the ceiling. The dugout greets you the same way it always does. Close, dim, unchanged. Sleep used to arrive all at once. Here it comes in intervals. You take it when it appears and let it go when it leaves. Settling back down after waking no longer frustrates you. You have learned that fighting wakefulness only sharpens it. You lie back and close your eyes again, even though you are not sleepy. Rest does not always mean sleeping here. Sometimes it is just stillness, letting your body cool and warm in its own slow cycle. Above you, snow continues to hold its place. It presses evenly, quietly. The roof does not move, the walls do not answer. This steadiness allows your thoughts to loosen, even when sleep does not return right away. At some point you drift, not deeply but enough. Images form and dissolve without narrative. Snow, darkness, weight. You wake again with no sense of how long it has been. Long nights do this. They stretch awareness thin. They blur the edges between rest and waking until the distinction feels less important. You sit up again and reach for the cup near the stove. The water inside is slushy now, not fully frozen, not fully liquid. You take a careful sip and feel the cold spread through you. It wakes you more effectively than any light could. You think about how people once measured winter by endurance rather than calendars, by how many nights passed like this, by how often sleep arrived and left without warning. The dugout does not ask you to keep track, it simply continues. You adjust your bedding and lie back down, turning onto your side. The wall supports your back. The ground supports everything else. Your body settles into a position that wastes the least heat. Your eyes close again. You're not sure whether you will sleep, but you let the possibility remain open. That openness feels important. Sleep comes more easily when it is invited rather than demanded. When you wake again, you realize you dreamed. You cannot remember what about. Only the feeling does. A sense of movement, of being somewhere else briefly. That alone feels like a gift. You lie still, savouring the fading warmth of it. Outside, the world remains locked in winter. Inside, the dugout stays the same. This sameness becomes the backdrop against which your body learns how to rest in pieces. You think about mornings that arrive too slowly and nights that never seem to end. About how the dark no longer feels dramatic, just extensive. It fills space without urgency. You notice how your thoughts have softened over time. They no longer race as much when you wake. They drift, then settle. Fatigue does not sharpen the mind here, it quiets it. At some point, the light near the doorway changes almost imperceptibly. A shift so slight you miss it at first. Then you realize the dark has thinned. Morning has arrived whether you slept through it or not. You sit up and feel the familiar stiffness again. The night has taken its toll, but not more than you expected. You are tired, but you are functional. That counts. You stretch carefully and prepare to begin the same routine again. Clear the doorway. Test the cold. Restore what froze. The cycle continues. Short sleep, long night, repeated until spring. You realize something as you move through the motions. Your body has stopped expecting rest to feel complete. It accepts partial recovery, enough to keep going, enough to survive another stretch of darkness. And as you settle back down later when night returns again far too soon, you no longer resent it. The long night has become familiar. And familiarity, even with exhaustion, brings a strange kind of peace. You wake to a feeling rather than a sound. A sense that the dugout is different tonight. Not colder, not warmer, just unsettled in a way that does not immediately explain itself. You lie still, eyes closed, letting the feeling sharpen. It comes from the air. It feels thinner somehow, as if something has shifted beyond the walls. You breathe in, slowly, and notice the faint taste of cold iron and smoke layered with something sharper. Weather has changed. You do not need to see it to know. You sit up and listen. Outside the wind moves again, but not with force. It drifts and circles, touching the sod roof from different angles, testing it without urgency. The sound reaches you softened and stretched, like fingers brushing fabric. You remember hearing people talk about nights like this. Evenings when nothing dramatic happened, yet sleep came harder than usual. Some blamed nerves. Others blamed pressure changes before storms. No one ever seemed certain, but everyone recognized the feeling. You shift your bedding slightly and pull the blanket closer around your shoulders. The dugout feels tighter when the wind moves this way, not louder, just more present. The walls seem to lean inward, not physically, but in awareness. You lie back down and close your eyes again, hoping sleep will return quickly. It does not. Your thoughts drift instead, slow and circular. You think about stories passed quietly between settlers, usually at night when light was low and voices stayed soft. There were things that people said to explain the unease, the earth settling, spirits moving beneath the plains, cold air pressing down harder after sunset. Most of it was spoken half joking, half serious. You never knew which parts were meant to be believed. You listen again. The wind slides across the roof, then pauses, then returns. Each pass feels deliberate, though you know it is not. Snow shifts somewhere above, a faint sound like fabric being folded. You roll onto your side and face the wall. The packed earth feels steady against your shoulder. You place your hand flat against it, grounding yourself in something solid. The wall does not move. It does not answer. That steadiness helps. In places like this, people filled silence with explanation. Not because the explanations were accurate, but because naming something made it less threatening. Dugouts bred stories the way damp walls bred mold. Quiet, persistent passed from one night to the next. You remember one tale someone once muttered about winds that travelled underground, slipping through old root paths and animal tunnels, making the earth hum before storms. It sounded ridiculous in daylight. Lying here now with the wind circling above it feels almost reasonable. Your breathing slows as you let the thought drift away. Fear feeds on attention. You've learned that much already. You light the stove briefly, not for warmth, but for reassurance. The flame catches and the soft glow steadies your thoughts. Smoke curls upward and finds the pipe without hesitation. The draft holds. That matters more than heat tonight. You sit and watch the ceiling as the air warms slightly. Moisture gathers in familiar spots but does not drip. Everything behaves as expected. The dugout has not changed, only your awareness has. You lie back down once the fire fades. The wind continues its slow patrol above you, but the sound dulls as snow absorbs it. Gradually the dugout grows quieter again. Sleep tries to return cautiously. You drift in and out, waking each time the wind shifts direction. The interruptions are brief, annoying but not frightening. At some point you dream of voices low and indistinct carried by the wind. They do not speak clearly, they do not call your name, they simply exist blending with the sound of moving air. You wake with the image still lingering, then let it fade. Morning comes with no storm, no dramatic change, just pale light creeping in at the doorway. The wind has moved on, leaving behind stillness. You sit up and feel foolish for how restless the night felt. Nothing happened. The roof holds, the walls stand, the dugout remains what it was. Still the memory of unease stays with you as you move through the morning routine. You clear the doorway, eat slowly, warm your hands by the stove. The dugout feels calm again, almost apologetic. You realize then that nights like that were probably remembered more vividly than uneventful ones. A strange night stood out in memory long after hundreds of ordinary ones faded. Stories grew that way. One restless night turning into a warning passed down for years. You rest during the afternoon, catching sleep in pieces as usual. The unease does not return. The dugout behaves itself steady and predictable. As evening approaches, you prepare for another night underground. The wind is gone. Snow sits quietly where it fell. The land feels heavy and settled. You lie down and pull the blankets close. The ceiling looms familiar and unchanging. The wall at your back feels solid. You breathe deeply and wait. Sleep arrives more easily tonight, as if making up for the night before. Your body accepts it gratefully, and as you drift off, you understand something that settlers rarely put into words. Dugouts did not just shelter bodies, they shaped imagination. The closeness, the darkness, the muffled world above all turned small sensations into stories. Tonight, though, there are no stories, just the earth holding steady and sleep coming quietly at last. You wake to a sound that feels out of place in the dugout. Not wind, not dripping, not the quiet settling of earth. It is softer than all of those. A small exhale, slow and even, followed by another. For a moment you think you're dreaming, then you understand what your mind has reached for. Sleep that deep does not belong to you anymore. You lie still and listen to the imagined rhythm, the kind of breathing that never startles itself awake, never hesitates. You've heard it before, back when nights were different. It belongs to bodies that trust rest without question. Children slept like that, in shared dugouts in spaces no larger than this one. Children often fell asleep first and woke last. Exhaustion claimed them completely. Cold noise, dripping ceilings, even hunger failed to break through once sleep arrived. Adults noticed this and spoke of it quietly with a mix of envy and relief. You turn slightly onto your side and feel the walls steady against your back. The dugout is quiet now, but your thoughts have found something to circle. You imagine the space filled not with fear or vigilance, but with small bodies, bundled together, breathing evenly through the long winter night. Adults learn to listen for danger. Children learn to sleep. You remember how sleep felt before winter taught you caution, how it came all at once heavy and total, dragging you under without asking permission. You did not listen then. You did not scan the dark. You simply rested. Here rest is negotiated, earned in short stretches, taken when offered. You sit up slowly, joints stiff, and rub warmth back into your hands. The dugout looks the same as it always does. Low ceiling, dark walls, everything unchanged, and yet the thought lingers. Families who lived this way often arranged sleeping spaces carefully. Children placed furthest from the walls, away from drafts and damp spots, closest to warmth, closest to adults. Bodies layered not just for heat, but for reassurance. You imagine how the dugout would sound with several people breathing inside it, how the air would thicken and soften, how cold would lose some of its edge simply because it had more bodies to work against. You lie back down and close your eyes, not sleeping yet, just listening to the quiet that remains. The dugout holds sound tightly. Even imagined breathing seems loud here. Children adapted faster. That was said often, not because they were braver, but because they accepted conditions without argument. They did not compare, they did not anticipate. They slept when tired and woke when hungry. Adults carried memory, adults carried worry. You turn onto your other side and tuck your hands beneath your arms, conserving warmth. Your body knows how to do this now, even if your mind keeps drifting. Muscles relax slightly. Breathing slows. At some point you do sleep. Not deeply, not all at once, but enough. When you wake again, the imagined breathing has faded. Only your own remains measured and alert. Morning arrives quietly. Light seeps into the dugout, pale and steady. You sit up and feel the familiar stiffness greet you. Sleep did its job, but only just. You clear the doorway and let cold air spill in. Outside the prairie looks unchanged snow stretching in every direction. You breathe deeply once, then retreat underground again. Exposure is brief now, habit has shortened it. Inside the dugout feels calm. The night passed without incident. No roof shifts, no leaks, no drafts found you in your sleep. That too is something children might take for granted, but adults count carefully. You eat slowly and rest afterward, letting your body settle. The thought returns again, uninvited. How strange it must have felt to be a child here. to accept this place as normal, to fall asleep to dripping water and muffled wind without attaching meaning to it. Some adults tried to imitate that. They forced stillness. They pretended not to listen. Sometimes it worked. More often, vigilance crept back in as soon as darkness settled. You lie down again in the afternoon, not expecting sleep, just rest. The dugout holds steady. The wall supports your back. The ceiling stays quiet. For a while, your thoughts slow enough to drift. You dream briefly, nothing clear, just warmth and weight and the sense of being surrounded. When you wake, you feel disoriented, then oddly refreshed. It surprises you. Perhaps this is how children managed it. By not fighting the dark, by letting the dugout be what it was without demanding more from it. As evening returns, you prepare for another night. The routine feels familiar, almost automatic now. Bedding adjusted, gaps checked, stove fed lightly, each action done without thought. You lie down and pull the blankets close, the dugout darkens. The world above retreats again. You listen as you always do. Nothing unusual reaches you. No strange wind, no settling snow, just the quiet persistence of winter holding its ground. You close your eyes and let your breathing slow. You do not expect deep sleep. You no longer expect that from nights like this, but you allow the possibility to exist. Somewhere between waking and rest, you feel your body let go a little more than usual. Muscles loosen, thoughts blur, awareness softens. It does not last long. You wake again as you always do. But for a brief stretch, sleep felt heavier, closer to what it used to be. You lie still, holding on to that memory. Children slept like stones, people used to say, heavy, unmoving, and you understand now why adults noticed, and why they remembered. Sleep like that did not last forever, even for them. Winter eventually taught everyone to listen, but for a while some bodies rested more easily than others. Tonight you rest as best you can, piecing together what sleep allows. The dugout holds steady, the earth remains where it is, and somewhere deep in memory, sleep still remembers how to be whole. You wake with a tightness in your chest that takes a moment to place. It is not pain, it is not fear. It is a heaviness, as though the air itself has gained weight overnight. You sit up slowly and take a careful breath. The air feels thick damp, carrying the faint sting of old smoke and something sour beneath it. Your lungs notice before your mind does. You pause, breathing shallowly, letting the sensation ease on its own. The dugout has been holding moisture again. You glance toward the walls and see it immediately. Dark patches have spread wider than before, creeping upward where warmth met cold too often. The floor near the edges looks soft, not muddy yet, but close. You rub your throat once instinctively and clear it quietly. Nights like this leave their mark, not dramatic, not sudden, just a subtle reminder that damp air lingers longer than cold air does. You have learned to notice these things early, before they settle into something harder to shake. You pull the cloth back from the doorway and let fresh air spill in, even though it brings cold with it. The change is immediate. The dugout exhales. Smoke thins. The heaviness in your chest loosens slightly. You stand there for a while, letting the place breathe. You do not keep the opening wide for long. Cold creeps in fast. You close it again once the air feels lighter, accepting the trade without complaint. You feed the stove carefully, keeping the flame low and steady. Too much heat will bring moisture back too quickly. Too little will leave the air stagnant. You have learned that the fire is not just for warmth, it moves air, it keeps things from settling. As the iron warms, you notice your breathing evening out. The tightness fades into a dull awareness, then disappears altogether. You sit back against the wall and let your shoulders drop. Illness never announces itself loudly out here. It arrives quietly through damp bedding, heavy air nights where coughing lingers longer than it should. You think about how many people must have lived with that constant edge, never knowing if a sore chest would pass or deepen. You shake the thought away and focus on what you can do. You hang a blanket closer to the stove, not to dry it fully, but to chase dampness out of it. You scatter a little more ash along the base of the wall, firming the ground underfoot. Small actions repeated often. The dugout responds subtly. The smell shifts, less sour, more neutral. Earth and smoke again familiar and manageable. You eat slowly, breathing between bites, letting warmth spread gradually through your chest. Food tastes heavier today, but grounding. You linger over it longer than usual. Later you lie down to rest, head propped slightly higher than before. You have learned this helps on nights when the air feels thick. Your breathing stays easier this way. The ceiling remains quiet. The walls hold. Sleep comes lightly and leaves just as easily. You wake once with a brief cough, then again with nothing at all. Each time you adjust and settle back in without frustration. This is part of the rhythm now. When evening approaches, the air feels clearer than it did this morning. The dugout has aired itself out enough to feel safe again. You prepare for night with extra care, checking bedding for damp spots and shifting anything that feels too cool or heavy. You lie down and pull the blanket close scarf loose around your neck rather than tight over your face. Breathing feels easy tonight. That alone brings relief. The dugout darkens as the fire fades. The world above stays quiet. Snow holds its place. The roof does not answer your movements. You close your eyes and let rest arrive where it can, not deep, not complete, but clean enough to matter. As you drift, you understand something that settles quietly alongside sleep. Surviving winter here is not about fighting cold alone. It is about managing air moisture and patience, about noticing small changes before they grow teeth. Tonight your chest feels light, your breath moves freely. The dugout has given you another night without consequence. That's enough. You wake with a thought already forming, the kind that arrives half-finished. It surprises you by how ordinary it feels. A cabin would be different. The idea settles in without longing or bitterness. Just curiosity. You imagine walls that stand upright without leaning inward. A roof you do not feel pressing down as you breathe. A floor that lifts you away from the ground instead of pulling cold straight into your bones. You lie still and let the comparison take shape. Cabins creak, they announce themselves. Wood responds loudly to wind and temperature, popping and groaning as it expands and contracts. Dugouts do not complain the same way. They absorb, they quiet. You realize you have grown used to that quiet, even dependent on it. You sit up and stretch, careful as always. The ceiling waits inches above your head. A cabin would let you stand without thinking. That alone would feel like luxury. And yet, you remember how the wind behaves in wooden structures, how it finds seams and corners and shakes them until sleep becomes impossible. How sound travels through planks and boards amplified instead of softened. You picture lying awake in a cabin listening to gusts slam against walls that cannot hide their presence. Down here the wind rarely reaches you directly. You light the stove and watch the flames settle. In a cabin heat would rush upward, collecting uselessly near the ceiling. You would pace, waiting for warmth to reach your feet. In the dugout, warmth lingers where you need it, held low and close by the earth itself. You lean back against the wall and feel its steady pressure. A cabin wall would feel distant by comparison, upright and detached. This wall feels involved, present. You do not know if that is better or worse. You only know it is familiar now. You eat slowly and let the thought continue its quiet exploration. Cabins smell different. Dry wood, resin, smoke that escapes more easily. Dugouts keep a scent trapped, layered thick. You have come to recognize those layers the way you recognize weather. Earth first, smoke second, everything else follows. You imagine waking in a cabin and seeing light through a window instead of through an opening. Real daylight, clean and direct. You imagine how that might change sleep, how it might anchor mornings more firmly, and then you imagine the opposite, a window rattling with frost, glass cracked by cold, snow piling high against the wall until light disappears anyway. You have heard people argue about this, cabin versus dugout. Which was better, which was safer, which made winter easier. Those conversations never ended with agreement. Everyone spoke from where they slept. You rise and move through your small space, stepping carefully around supplies and bedding. A cabin would give you room to pace, to stretch fully, to stand without crouching. That freedom would feel good, especially on mornings when your back aches from sleeping curled too long. But a cabin would also demand more. More fuel, more maintenance. more attention to gaps that open and close with every temperature shift. Wood dries, wood splits, wood burns if you are careless. The earth does not burn. You pause at the doorway and look out. Snow stretches across the prairie unbroken and quiet. A cabin would stand out here, visible from a distance. Dugouts hide themselves by nature. From far enough away, the land looks untouched. That invisibility has its own comfort. You are less exposed, less announced. Winter feels personal enough without advertising your presence to it. You retreat inside and close the opening again. The dugout wraps itself back around you, immediate and close. The comparison fades slightly, losing urgency. You rest during the afternoon, letting your body sink into familiar positions. You notice how instinctively you move now, avoiding damp spots, favouring warmth, conserving energy. These habits grew here. In a cabin they might change, or they might follow you anyway. You think about nights spent listening. In a cabin, every branch scrape, every gust would announce itself loudly. Down here, sounds arrive softened, filtered, manageable. Your sleep fractured as it is benefits from that. And yet you know cabins offer distance. Distance from dampness, distance from the ground, distance from the feeling of being buried. You acknowledge that too. As evening approaches, you prepare for another night underground. The routine unfolds without thought. Bedding adjusted. Stove fed lightly, gaps checked. You move efficiently, practiced. You lie down and stare at the ceiling for a while. A cabin ceiling would feel higher, safer perhaps, or just farther away. Here the roof stays close enough to remind you of its presence. That awareness keeps you cautious. It keeps you listening. It keeps you alive. You turn onto your side and pull the blankets close. The wall supports your back. Ground supports everything else. The comparison fades completely as sleep approaches. Not because it has been resolved, but because it no longer matters tonight. This is where you are. This is what holds you. Cabin or dugout, winter makes demands either way. What matters is how you meet them. Down here in the earth, you have learned how. Sleep arrives quietly, carrying no preference with it. You wake to a stillness so complete it feels artificial. For a moment you think your ears have stopped working. There is no wind, no dripping, no settling. Even your own breathing seems muted, as if the dugout has wrapped it in cloth. You sit up slowly and wait for sound to return. It does not. This kind of quiet only comes after heavy snow. Not the drifting kind that slides and whispers, but the kind that seals everything in place. The world above has been padded into silence, and the dugout sits beneath it like something carefully wrapped and set aside. You pull back the cloth at the doorway just enough to look. Snow presses close, not blocking the entrance completely, but narrowing it until the outside world appears as a pale curved shape. Light filters through, softly without glare. You clear a small path, careful not to remove too much. Experience has taught you restraint. Snow piled against the dugout is not always an enemy. It holds warmth. It shields the walls. It keeps the wind from finding purchase. Inside again, the air feels unusually steady. Not warm but balanced. You notice it immediately. Your breath does not sting. Your fingers do not ache as quickly. The dugout feels almost comfortable in its own quiet way. You rest for a while, letting your body absorb the difference. Snow has done what no amount of careful sealing ever could. It has wrapped the dugout evenly, smoothing out the sharp edges of winter. Later you lie down again, surprised by how easily rest returns. Sleep comes in longer stretches today. When you wake, it is not because of cold and noise, but simply because your body has had enough. The snow remains outside unmoving, the roof holds, the walls stay firm. You prepare for night with unhurried motions, aware that this calm may not last. Snow will melt eventually. Wind will return, but for now the dugout rests in a rare pocket of peace. You lie down and close your eyes, letting the silence carry you. Winter has paused its demands just briefly, and you sleep as deeply as the dugout allows. You wake to pressure before you wake to light. Something leans against the dugout, firm and unyielding, changing the way the air moves inside. You shift and feel the difference immediately. The space feels tighter, quieter, as though the outside world has pressed its face up against the walls and decided to stay there. You sit up and listen. Nothing moves, no wind slips through gaps, no snow slides from the roof. The silence is thick, almost heavy. You know what this means before you see it. You pull back the cloth at the doorway and are met with white. Not drifting flakes, not loose powder. A packed wall of snow, curved and close, blocking the opening almost entirely. Light filters through it dimly, turning the dugout entrance into a pale blur. The storm came hard and fast in the night, and it did not stop politely at your door. You do not rush. That would be a mistake. You take a moment to breathe, to let your eyes adjust, to remind yourself that this has happened before. Dugouts are easy to bury. Snow flows around them instead of piling neatly on one side the way it does with cabins. By morning, the land can look smooth and untouched, with a person sealed quietly beneath it. You clear a small space with your hands first testing the density. The snow resists packed tight by wind and weight. You switch to a shovel and work slowly, carving a narrow tunnel outward rather than opening the doorway fully. Cold air pours in immediately, sharp and unforgiving, reminding you why you do not rush this work. Each scoop sends its sound outward instead of inward. The dugout remains quiet behind you, holding its breath. You stop, often listening for shifting weight above. Snow can behave like a solid one moment and a moving thing the next. You do not want to invite a collapse that blocks the door completely. You work patiently, shaping a path rather than breaking free all at once. Eventually light sharpens. The tunnel opens enough that you can see sky, pale and low. You pause there, crouched in the opening, breathing hard steam rising from your coat. The world above is bright and still, as though the storm never happened. You clear just enough to move in and out safely, then stop. Removing all the snow would expose the dugout to wind again. Leaving some of it pressed against the walls keeps the interior calmer. You have learned that balance matters more than freedom. Inside again, the dugout feels changed. The air is colder now, but fresher. The silence has broken slightly. A faint hiss of wind reaches you from above, distant and softened by layers of snow. You sit down and rest, heart still beating hard from the effort. Your muscles ache, but it is a clean ache, earned. The dugout has not failed you. It simply needed tending. As the day passes, you notice how the snow reshapes sound and light. The doorway glows softly, reflecting brightness inward. The roof remains quiet, pressed evenly from above. The walls feel more insulated, steadier. You rest more than usual today. Digging out takes energy, and winter does not replace it easily. You eat slowly, letting warmth return to your hands and feet in stages. When you lie down later, sleep comes surprisingly quickly. The dugout feels sealed again, held firmly in place by the weight outside. The storm has done its damage and left its gift behind. Night returns early, as it always does. You prepare carefully, knowing snow could shift again while you sleep. The doorway is clear enough. Supplies are within reach. The routine feels reassuring. You lie back and listen. The snow holds. The roof stays quiet. The world above feels distant, muffled, almost unreal. Being buried, you realize, is not always frightening. Sometimes it feels like being hidden, protected from wind and sound and movement. Sleep arrives in longer stretches tonight. The weight outside keeps the dugout steady. The cold remains, but it does not sharpen, and as you drift, you understand something that only nights like this can teach. Out here, even storms can become shelter if you learn how to let them. You wake from a dream that dissolves before you can hold it. Only the feeling remains. Hunger maybe, or cold threaded into it. Your body has learned to speak in sensations, first explanation second. You lie still for a moment, listening inward rather than outward. The dugout feels the same as it did when you fell asleep. Quiet, pressed, held in place by snow and earth. Nothing has shifted while you rested, and that knowledge settles you before your eyes even open. Your stomach tightens gently, a reminder rather than a demand. Hunger here is rarely sharp. It arrives gradually, layering itself over fatigue and cold until everything feels heavier. You sit up slowly and feel how the movement pulls warmth away from your core. You pause, letting your body adjust before doing anything else. Food has become a marker of time. Not meals in the old sense, but moments when energy returns just enough to matter. You reach for what you have and eat carefully, chewing longer than necessary, letting heat from the stove do its quiet work alongside it. The dugout smells different again today, less damp than before. Snow pressed against the walls has sealed out some of the moisture and the air feels cleaner for it. You notice the difference without lingering on it. Observation has become instinct now. You rest after eating, letting warmth spread slowly. The earth beneath you feels cold and unyielding but predictable. Predictability counts for a lot. You shift slightly, finding the position that wastes the least energy. Hunger returns later in the day, softer this time, almost apologetic. You ignore it for a while, then answer it when your hands begin to feel unsteady. This rhythm shapes sleep too. Nights are lighter when you eat closer to rest. Dreams come and go differently depending on what your body has left to work with. You lie down in the afternoon and drift almost immediately. Not deep sleep, but something close. Images slide through your mind without structure. Food appears often, warmth, weight, the feeling of being full enough to relax. You wake again with a faint disappointment, then let it go. Dreams are generous here, but brief. As evening approaches, you prepare for night with extra care. Hunger makes cold feel sharper. You eat what you can spare, saving just enough for morning. The balance is familiar now. You have learned not to overthink it. You lie down and pull the blankets close. The dugout darkens. The stove fades. Your stomach settles, not satisfied, but calm. Sleep comes in pieces again, but they fit together better tonight. Hunger dulls into background sensation. Cold remains steady. The earth holds. And as you drift, you realize that even hunger becomes part of the rhythm. Another thing to manage, another signal to listen to. Winter teaches you to sleep with needs unmet and still rest anyway. You wake with the sense that something small has gone right, not dramatically, not enough to celebrate, just enough to notice. Your hands are warmer than usual when you pull them from beneath the blankets. Your feet ache less. The cold is still there, of course, but it feels managed rather than overwhelming. You lie still for a moment, letting that awareness settle before you move. These small improvements matter more than big ones ever could. Out here, comfort does not arrive all at once. It collects quietly in details you almost miss. You sit up carefully and take stock. The blanket you hung near the stove yesterday is drier than it was the night before. Not dry, but lighter, easier to handle. You drape it over your shoulders and feel how it traps warmth more effectively than the others. You make a mental note to keep doing that even when it feels pointless. The dugout smells calmer this morning. Earth and smoke, yes, but less sharp. Snow outside still presses against the walls, holding the air steady. You notice how much you have come to rely on that pressure, the way it seals the space into something manageable. You eat slowly and sit close to the wall, back supported by packed soil. This spot has become your favourite niche, without you ever deciding it would. Your body chose it on your behalf, drawn to where warmth lingers longest and drafts hesitate. There is comfort in routine that surprises you. The same motions, repeated day after day, begin to smooth rough edges, adjust the bedding, check the doorway, turn the cup so it does not freeze solid. None of these things are remarkable on their own. Together they make the night easier. Later, when you lie down to rest, you realize how rarely your thoughts race anymore. They drift instead, slow and unhurried. Winter has stripped away urgency. There is only what needs to be done now and what can wait until later. You wake briefly to the sound of a drop hitting the floor, then realize it is not water. It is a small piece of dirt loosening from the wall, settling harmlessly at your side. You brush it away without reaction and settle back in. Even that feels normal now. As evening approaches, you find yourself lingering over small comforts. The warmth of the stove against your palms, the way the blanket folds just right under your neck, the familiar creak of your joints easing as you stretch. These things do not erase hardship, but they soften it. You lie down earlier than usual tonight, not because you're more tired, but because the dugout feels ready for you. The space feels arranged, balanced. Everything is where it should be. Sleep comes quickly, surprising you. When you wake again, it is not from discomfort, but simply because your body has shifted position. You settle back down easily without irritation. These small victories add up. A better night, a warmer hand, a moment of ease. You understand now how people survived winters like this, not by conquering them, but by finding tiny places to rest within them. The dugout does not change, you do. And as sleep returns, you let yourself enjoy that thought just briefly before letting it fade into rest. You wake to stillness again, but this time it feels earned rather than accidental. The dugout has settled into itself the way a body does after finding a comfortable position. Nothing presses unexpectedly, nothing shifts. The air feels steady, neither damp nor sharp, just present. You lie there for a while without moving, listening for the small signs you have learned to trust. No drip close enough to reach you. No draft brushing your face, no subtle groan from above. The earth is quiet in a way that suggests cooperation. When you finally sit up, your movements feel smoother than they did weeks ago. Your joints still complain, but the protest fades faster. You know where to place your weight. You know how to move without scraping the ceiling or stirring the air too much. Your body has memorized the space. You reach for the blanket you dried near the stove and wrap it around your shoulders. It holds warmth better now, fibers less stiff, less heavy. You do not think about how long that took to achieve. You simply enjoy the result. The dugout smells familiar in a way that no longer registers as unpleasant. Earth smoke and fabric have blended into a single background note. It feels stable, like the smell of a place you recognize even with your eyes closed. You eat slowly, not because food is scarce this morning, but because haste feels unnecessary. Winter has trained you out of rushing. Nothing improves when done too quickly here. Later you lie down again and realize you're no longer counting how often you wake. Sleep and waking have blurred together into something gentler. You rest when you can, you move when you must. The boundary no longer matters much. You wake briefly to adjust your position, then drift again without thought. The dugout supports this rhythm. It does not demand deep sleep. It allows shallow rest repeated enough time to keep you steady. As evening approaches, you prepare for night with quiet confidence. The routine unfolds without effort. You do not check everything twice anymore. Once is enough. Trust has replaced vigilance, not because danger is gone, but because familiarity has taken its place. You lie down and pull the blankets close, and the ceiling feels close but not threatening. The wall at your back feels solid and known. Your breathing slows without instruction. You notice something small before sleep takes you. You are no longer waiting for spring as urgently as you once did. You still want it. You still imagine it. But winter no longer feels like an interruption. It feels like a season you are living inside rather than enduring. Sleep comes gently without bargaining. You wake with spring already in your mind, even though winter has not loosened its grip. It's not a vision so much as a feeling. A quiet expectation like pressure easing before you can name the source. The dugout feels unchanged when you open your eyes. The ceiling stays close. The walls stay dark. The air remains cool and steady. Nothing outside has shifted enough to announce itself, and yet something inside you has. You lie still and let the thought pass without chasing it. Anticipation can be dangerous out here. It makes you careless. It convinces you that hardship is almost over when almost can stretch longer than you expect. Still the idea lingers. You sit up slowly and stretch, feeling the familiar pull in your back and shoulders. It fades more quickly now. Your body has learned how to recover inside this space. That alone feels like progress. You eat and rest as you always do, but your attention drifts. You notice small changes you might have ignored before. The way snow outside the doorway looks less powdery, more compact. The way moisture on the wall behaves differently, sliding rather than freezing in place. Subtle signs that the season is thinking about turning even if it is not committed yet. You do not trust these signs completely. Winter is skilled at pretending to leave before returning harder than before. You keep your routines intact. You do not loosen habits that have kept you steady. You lie down again in the afternoon and drift into sleep more easily than expected. Dreams come quickly and feel different. There is more light in them, more space. You wake with that brightness lingering behind your eyes, then watch it fade as the dugout comes back into focus. As evening approaches, you feel a quiet restlessness, not discomfort, something closer to readiness. You prepare for night carefully, even though part of you wants to rush through it. You resist that urge. Rushing has no place here. You lie down and listen as you always do. The sounds are familiar. The roof stays quiet. The walls hold. The snow outside remains still. Sleep comes and goes in pieces again, but the pieces feel larger tonight. When you wake, you do not feel pulled back to awareness as sharply. Your body settles again more willingly, as if it senses that the long night is no longer endless. You wake before morning and lie still, aware of your own breathing. It feels lighter somehow. The air does not press as heavily against your chest. You take that in without drawing conclusions. When light finally reaches the doorway, it feels different. Sharper, less filtered. You sit up and watch it spread across the floor, touching familiar shapes in a new way. Nothing has changed, and yet the space feels slightly altered by it. You step outside briefly and feel it at once. The cold is still there, but it does not bite as deeply. It lingers rather than attacks. You do not smile. You have learned better than that. But you notice. Back inside, you sit and rest, letting the dugout settle around you. You think about how many nights it has held you, how many small adjustments you made without realizing you were learning something permanent. You think about leaving it eventually. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday. The idea feels distant, almost unreal. This place has shaped you too thoroughly to be discarded lightly. As night returns again, you prepare with the same care as always. The routines remain. The habits stay in place. You lie down and pull the blankets close. Sleep comes easily tonight, deeper than usual. When you wake briefly, it is without anxiety. You roll over and rest again without listening too hard. The dugout holds steady through the night. Winter does too, but less aggressively. Something has shifted, even if you cannot name it yet. You wake to morning with a quiet understanding. Spring will come when it is ready. Until then, you will continue to sleep here, steady and practiced, letting the earth hold you a little longer. You wake slowly without urgency, the way you do now when nothing has gone wrong. The dugout feels familiar in a deeper way than before, not just known but accepted. The ceiling rests where it always has. The walls press close with the same steady presence. The air is cool, calm and cooperative. You lie still for a while, listening out of habit rather than concern. Nothing asks for your attention. No drip threatens your bedding. No draft sneaks across your face. No distant shift makes your muscles tense. The quiet feels earned. When you sit up, your movements are smooth and unthinking. Your body knows exactly how much space it has, how far it can rise without touching the roof, where to place a hand for balance. The dugout has taught you these things without words. You stretch, feeling stiffness loosen quickly now, and take a slow breath. The air moves easily through your chest. It smells like this place always does, but the scent no longer registers as earth or smoke or dampness. It registers as home, at least for now. You go through your morning motions without reflection. Warm the stove lightly. Move the cup so it will thaw. Adjust bedding where weight settled overnight. Each action flows into the next. You do not evaluate them anymore. You simply do them. The thought comes quietly, without drama. You know how to sleep here. Not comfortably, not luxuriously, but reliably. That knowledge changes everything. You rest during the day, drifting in and out of sleep without frustration. The dugout holds the same steady temperature. The snow outside continues to soften, though you do not test it. You have learned not to hurry change along. As evening approaches, you feel no dread. The night no longer looms as something to survive. It arrives as something familiar, a continuation rather than a threat. You prepare for sleep one last time with the same quiet care you always use. Bedding arranged, openings checked, stove fed just enough, nothing rushed, nothing forgotten. You lie down and pull the blankets close. The wall supports your back, the ground supports everything else. The ceiling feels close but not oppressive, just present. You listen once more, not because you expect danger, but because listening has become part of rest itself. The dugout answers with silence dense and reliable. Your breathing slows, muscles loosen, thoughts soften. You realize something mentally without any need to hold on to it. Sleeping in a dugout during a frontier winter is not about bravery. It is about earning, about noticing, about adapting until the night no longer feels hostile. The earth has held you through cold, damp hunger, fear, and long darkness. You have met it halfway, adjusting and listening and resting where you could. Sleep arrives fully now, heavier than it has in a long time. And as you drift, the dugout does what it has always done. It stays. Now everything slows. The sounds fade first, not abruptly, but gently, as though the world itself is lowering its voice. Your breathing stretches out, each inhale softer than the last, each exhale lingering just a little longer in the quiet air. The dugout feels steady, calm, settled into the earth the way it was always meant to be. Snow rests above, no longer heavy, no longer threatening. The ground beneath you holds its shape without effort. You do not need to listen anymore. You do not need to adjust or prepare. Nothing is being asked of you now. The cold has softened into something neutral. The darkness feels smooth rather than deep. Time loosens its grip and drifts somewhere beyond the walls. Your body sinks into rest the way it knows how now, without resistance, without expectation. Muscles release, thoughts untangle. The small worries that once followed you into sleep no longer find purchase. There is only the quiet consistency of the earth and the gentle rhythm of your breath. You are safe here, for this moment, for this night, and that is enough.